He began with 10 square meters and one broken fishing rod. Every resource he pulled from the clouds instantly multiplied into 10. Sus woke above an endless cloud sea, completely isolated and unarmed. Hunger, freezing nights, and hidden monsters were already killing thousands. His impossible advantage followed one brutally simple and profitable rule. One bottle became 10, making clean water his first real weapon. Before the first tide, he built farmland, defenses, traps, and an arsenal. The weakest island became the strongest technological fortress in the district. Hours earlier, Sus jolted upright in one sharp motion. Beneath him lay rough dirt ground thick with briny damp moisture. He swept his gaze across his surroundings, his pupils blowing wide. This was a floating islet covering barely 10 square meters. Beyond its edges churned, billowing gray-white sea of clouds bottomless and endless. A rickety wind-leaking wooden hut stood alone at the island's center. Other than that, only a tattered bamboo fishing rod rested within his reach. A stabbing pain shot through his mind, as a flood of massive information forced its way into his neural pathways. 7 billion people across the globe had all been transported collectively to this mysterious realm known as the Sea of Clouds Floating Isles. Everyone started with exactly the same setup. A 10 square meter islet, a ramshackle hut, and a single fishing rod. To survive, they had no choice but to use this rod to fish supplies out of the cloud layers. Fishing supplies from clouds sounded absurd, but the rules left no alternative. Sus grabbed the rod. Its bamboo shaft was crisscrossed with cracks. The fishing line was twisted from unidentifiable plant fibers, and the hook plain iron wire. A translucent light screen glimmered faintly in the bottom right corner of his vision. With a flick of his thought, the screen unfurled to display several options: chat channel, trading post, personal profile. He tapped chat channel, which split into world, national, city, and district subchannels. The first 3 were grayed out and locked. Only the district channel was illuminated. As soon as he entered, dense lines of text scrolled frantically. The top right corner showed the current district population. 10,000 out of 10,000. The stranded survivor closed the chat interface. Each person could only send 10 messages in the channel per day. He had to save every word for critical moments. His stomach rumbled hollowly, a sharp reminder that complaining was useless. He needed to start fishing immediately, or he wouldn't last a day. He walked to the island's edge and leaned forward to peer down. The gray-white cloud sea flowed sluggishly, shadowy shapes faintly darting deep within the mist. Sus cast the bamboo rod. The iron hook, baited with a scrap of what he'd picked up beside the hut, sank into the cloud expanse. Minutes ticked by. The blistering sun hung overhead, turning the shelterless islet into a steaming furnace. Sweat dripped down his forehead, vanishing the instant it hit the parched earth. Sus licked his cracked lips, white-knuckling the rod so hard his knuckles blanched. 3 full hours passed without the float. So much as twitching. Hunger and thirst gnawed at him, making his vision swim. Wails grew louder in the district channel. Out of 10,000 people, only a mere dozen had caught anything, mostly lumber and rags. A message suddenly popped up in the channel, sent by someone named Wong Tong. Sus watched the farce unfolding in the channel with cold detachment. 10 planks for a single sip of water was outright predatory exploitation. Yet trapped in this desperate situation, people would trade anything to stay alive. Just then, the rod in his hands lurched violently downward. A massive pull surged up from beneath the cloud sea, nearly yanking Sus straight off the floating island. He planted his feet in a wide horse stance, leaning his whole body backward, veins bulging in his forearms as he hauled back with all his strength. The fishing line stretched taut and creaked under pressure. The clouds roiled as whatever he'd hooked thrashed wildly, possessing terrifying strength. Sus hauled the catch upward. Gritting his molars, Sus heaved upward with all his might. With a great splash, the cloud layers split open. A faintly glowing object arced through the air and crashed heavily onto the island's dirt. Gasping for breath, Sus focused his gaze. It was a clear plastic bottle filled with transparent liquid. Ordinary mineral water, 500 milliliters. Before he could crack a smile, an emotionless mechanical voice echoed in his head. The tenfold multiplier system bound itself to Sus. Every supply Sus fished from the clouds would multiply tenfold. The catch contained 10 bottles of mineral water. 500 milliliters multiplied into 10 bottles. Sus froze on the spot, eyes fixed rigidly on the virtual panel floating before him. The legendary impossible survival advantage from web novels was real. Wild joy flooded his chest. He clenched his fist hard enough for his nails to dig into his palm, using the sharp pain to confirm this was no hallucination. The single bottle on the ground blurred for a split second, then multiplied into 10 identical bottles lying neatly across the dirt. The tenfold system user twisted open one bottle and chugged it directly down. Cool liquid slid down his throat, easing the worst of his thirst instantly. He drank half the bottle, then screwed the cap tight to save the rest. With 10 bottles of water, he'd solved his survival crisis and even gained the capital to get a head start in this world. The trading post only allows 3 trades per day. Sus opened the trading panel. He listed to bottles of mineral water and set his terms. He's putting the full bottles of water up for trade. What a saint. Ignoring the channel's uproar, Sus approved the trade instantly. A flash of light swallowed the 2 water bottles, and 40 planks of lumber plus 60 bundles of thatch materialized on the ground. Staring at the supplies that had appeared out of thin air, Sus smiled in satisfaction. He tapped the construction tab in the bottom right corner of his vision. The icon for his dilapidated hut glimmered, marked upgradable. Ramshackle hut, drafty on all sides, only provides minimal shelter. Upgrade cost lumber times 20 thatch 30. Upgrade. The island builder spoke the command silently in his mind and confirmed immediately. At his order, 20 planks and 30 bundles of thatch dissolved into a brilliant white light that wrapped entirely round the crumbling old hut. The light lingered for a dozen seconds, accompanied by the creak and grind of wooden planks fitting together, then faded away. A brand new hut stood before Sus. Sturdy hut fully sealed against wind and rain, shields against harsh weather, and grants a sense of safety. Furnished with one simple wooden bed, the determined fisherman pushed open the thick wooden door and stepped inside. The salty, howling sea wind that had once torn through the hut was completely blocked out. The air inside was noticeably cooler than outside. In the corner sat a plain wooden bed, exuding a faint natural timber scent. It had no soft mattress, yet it was infinitely better than sleeping on rough bare dirt. This actually feels like a proper shelter. The fortified survivor flopped onto the bed and let out a long sigh of relief. But he knew rest would have to wait. His stomach roared in protest, a loud reminder that while his water shortage was fixed, he still had no food. Humans can't live without sustenance. Without food, he wouldn't last more than a few days in this hellish place. Sus stepped back outside, grabbed his tattered bamboo rod once more, and strode to the island's edge. The cloud sea remained an endless churn of murky gray, gaping like an abyss, ready to swallow everything. He drew a deep breath and cast a wire hook, baited with wood shavings, back into the mist. Time trickled onward. The sun dipped west, slightly cooling the islet, but relentless hunger left Sus dizzy and lightheaded. 30 full minutes passed, and the float hadn't stirred so much as a ripple. Just as Sus prepared to reel in his line and check the bait, certain he'd caught nothing, a faint tremor ran up the rod. The simple float on the cloud surface plunged sharply downward, tearing a small, swirling vortex in the mist. Something's on the line. Sus's gaze sharpened. He gripped the rod firmly and hauled upward hard. This catch was far lighter than the mineral water had been. No violent tugging threatening to drag him overboard. He barely strained his arms before yanking his prize clear of the cloud sea. A dull thud echoed as a damp, dark yellow oil paper package landed on the dirt. Sus hurried over and tore the paper open. Inside lay a half-pound hard black loaf of bread alongside a strip of dried unknown animal meat, releasing an inviting salty aroma. The catch contained low-grade black bread's one dried jerky one. Before Sus could reach for the food, the cold mechanical voice resounded in his head again, right on cue. The multiplier triggered immediately. The catch contained low-grade black bread times 10 dried jerky times 10. The oil paper packet blurred for a heartbeat. Then 10 loaves of black bread and 10 strips of jerky lined up neatly at his feet. This is incredible. Sus couldn't hold back a crude exclamation while joy surging through his chest. He snatched a strip of jerky and bit into it without a second thought, chewing vigorously. The meat was tough, heavy with smoke and salt. Yet to his starving self, it tasted finer than top-tier A5 Wagyu from a 3-star restaurant. He chewed the meat, washed it down with his remaining half bottle of mineral water, and forced half the loaf of bread down his throat. His empty stomach finally felt full, his drained stamina rapidly restoring as vitality flooded back into his body. As Sus savored his hard-earned meal, the district channel icon in the corner of his vision flashed frantically, paired with shrill system alert chimes. Frowning slightly, he opened the channel. A voice message was pinned to the very top, sent by a man named Lai Chong, whose profile picture showed a heavy-set man in black-rimmed glasses. The stranded survivor tapped the audio. There's a monster. There's a monster under the clouds. Li Chong's voice trembled with raw terror, layered with ragged gasps and howling wind, as if his throat would tear from screaming. Its size was enormous, its strength insane. Sob. The audio cut off abruptly, leaving a dead static hum. Seconds later, the chat exploded. There are actual monsters in the cloud sea. This is a death trap. Panic spread through the channel like a plague, everyone venting their unbridled fear. The resourceful castaway stared out at the churning cloud sea, his brows drawn tight. He recalled the shadowy shape starting deep in the mist he'd glimpsed on his first cast. The seemingly calm sea of clouds was nothing more than a massive monster den. Still, judging by Li Chang's ordeal, staying safely on the floating island kept them out of harm's way, so long as they weren't pulled over the edge. These small islands were their only sanctuary in this bizarre world. His eyes turned cold and sharp. He carefully carried the rest of his food back into the hut for storage, then picked up his fishing rod once more. The shadow of the monsters hung heavy over every survivor's heart. The chat channel overflowed with panicked complaints and desperate curses. Many had thrown their rods away in terror, huddling inside their drafty shacks, too frightened to even glance at the cloud sea. Yet hunger and thirst were deadlier than any beast. The stranded survivor knew better. With his tenfold multiplier system and endless supplies of food and water, he could afford to fish without pause, pulling far ahead of everyone else, now that others dared not cast their lines. This was the perfect chance to power level without competition. He cast the iron hook back into the cloud sea, the weight stretched on longer than ever before. The sun sank below the horizon, staining the cloud sea an eerie blood red, making it look even more sinister and dangerous. The tenfold system user held the rod steady, his gaze locked firmly on the tiny float drifting atop the mist. 1 hour passed, then 2. Darkness fell completely, the hut the only faint source of light on the islet. Suddenly, the float plummeted downward at breakneck speed. Big catch incoming. Sus planted his legs firmly, arched his back, and hauled backward with all his might. This weight dwarfed every previous catch. The fishing line hummed a shrill, strained tone on the verge of snapping. A tremendous counterforce pulled down from beneath the clouds, yanking hard against the hook. The island builder gritted his teeth, veins bulging across his forehead. The tenfold system user hauled the catch upward. He stepped sharply backward, leveraging his full body weight to jerk the rod upward. A deafening crash split the mist as a heavy object soared through the air and crashed onto the dirt. Gasping for air, Sus looked through the dim light to see what he'd reeled in. It was an ancient wooden treasure chest. Its surface was coated in moss and deep scratch marks emanating an air of ancient mystery. A treasure chest. Sus's eyes brightened. He hurried forward and flipped open the lid. No gold or jewels lay inside, only a yellowed sheepskin parchment resting quietly at the bottom. He picked up the parchment. Blueprint. 1 basic water purifier blueprint. Basic water purifier. Blueprint unlocks construction of a basic water purifier. Once learned. Crafting materials required. The recipe required 20 pieces of lumber. The recipe also required 10 stones and 5 portions of cloud sea filter sand. It was a water purifier. Sus's heart hammered wildly, his breath quickening. In these early survival days where water was more precious than gold, whoever controlled a steady water supply held absolute power. The system multiplied the new catch tenfold. The multiplier produced 10 basic water purifier blueprints. A flash of light swept over the parchment in his hand, multiplying the single sheet into a thick stack of blueprints. Excitement flooded Sus's face. He crushed 1 blueprint between his palms, and the complete knowledge to build a water purifier flooded straight into his mind. But there was a problem. He only had lumber on hand, no stones, and certainly no cloud filter sand. Time to cash in big at the trading post. Sus opened trading post immediately and listed 2 of the blueprints for trade. He offered to purifier blueprints for filter sand, a Sky Island foundation stone, or a large stockpile of ordinary stone. As soon as the listing posted, the previously lifeless district channel exploded, as if a depth charge had detonated. The district immediately recognized that a working purifier could create a permanent supply of drinking water. As the crowd scrambled to offer everything they owned for the blueprints, a discordant voice cut through the chatter. Wang Tong denounced the listing as fraud and argued that its rare construction materials made the blueprint useless. He claimed an unbuildable blueprint was worthless and accused Sus of exploiting desperate survivors. The island builder watched Wang Tong's frantic, undignified outburst in the chat channel and let out a cold snort. Sus refused to answer because a functioning machine would destroy every accusation more effectively than an argument. He only needed to slap the looks off these fools' faces with cold, hard facts. Against Wang Tong's slander and the doubts of some people in the channel, Sus felt completely unruffled. He even wanted to laugh. Their refusal to recognize value would keep them trapped at the bottom. The determined fisherman closed the chat channel outright. Then, a crisp system chime rang out from the trading zone. Though Wang Tong was stirring up trouble in the channel, there were still sharp people who recognized the blueprint's value, as well as lucky survivors who fished up rare materials. The first exchange consumed 1 purifier blueprint. The first trade delivered 10 portions of cloud sea filter sand and 20 stones. The second exchange used another purifier blueprint. The second tray delivered 1 Sky Island foundation stone and 30 stones. Glancing at his steadily filling inventory of materials, a sharp glint flashed in Suze's eyes. He immediately opened the construction panel and selected the unlocked basic water purifier option. Timber, stone, and 10 faintly glowing chunks of cloud sea filter sand lifted, swirling, and merging midair amid a rumbling mechanical roar. A strange contraption half the height of a human assembled from timber and stone landed beside his wooden cabin. The basic water purifier converts any liquid or cloud mist into pure water. Its conversion rate reached 1,000 milliliters per hour. The determined fisherman patted the rough outer shell of the purifier. He remembered others complaining in the chat channel about toxic cloud mist they'd fished up. That substance was a deadly poison everyone avoided. Yet to him, it was an endless supply of raw materials. The fortified survivor immediately listed several planks of wood in the trading zone and easily traded them for 3 glass jars sealed tight, each filled with toxic mist. He uncapped the jars, poured all the swirling dark green poisonous fog into the purifier's feed inlet, and firmly pressed the activation button. A low hum rumbled from the purifier, and the filter sand inside began to glow pale blue. Roughly 10 minutes later, a tiny drip echoed from the outlet at the bottom of the machine. A crystal clear, transparent drop of water fell into a plastic bottle he'd prepared in advance. Suze's eyes lit up, his gaze fixed rigidly on the spout. Drip, drip, the flow grew faster, soon forming a thin, clear stream. In less than 30 minutes, the bottle was filled. Suze picked up the bottle, twisted off the cap, and took a sniff. There was no strange odor whatsoever, only the faint sweet scent unique to pure water. The catch contained 100 milliliters pure water. Without hesitation, Suze listed this freshly produced bottle of pure water in the trading zone. Private offers were permitted, fully trustworthy, continuously buying large quantities of rare materials. As soon as this trade listing popped up, the entire regional channel fell dead silent for a full 10 seconds. Then the chat erupted into total chaos. Pure water. It's really pure water. The blueprint really works. That idiot Wong Tong, get out here. Meanwhile, survivors holding valuable stock descended into a frantic buying spree. Sending the trade right now. Accept it, please, the resourceful castaway smiled faintly. Monopoly is the most lucrative business there is. Riding the pure water output from his purifier, Suze ran in massive supplies. Over the next several hours, he bought up every last metal ingot, timber, and stone. Most importantly, he traded for 10 faintly glowing Sky Island foundation stones. With these stones, he could finally launch his Grand Island construction project. This was the Sky Island Foundation Stone, a miraculous item that expanded island territory. Night fell deep, bitter winds howling above the sea of clouds. The fortified survivor stood at the edge of his 10-square-meter Sky Island, staring down at the churning black void below, tossing a faintly cobalt-glowing stone between his palms. 10 square meters is cramped, barely enough room to turn around. Time to expand. Suze's gaze sharpened as he opened the construction panel and selected Island Expansion. A system prompt chimed instantly. Detected tenfold Sky Island foundation stones. Use all to expand current island. Yes? The word barely left his mouth when the 10 stones in his hand burst into 10 brilliant streaks of blue light, slamming into the dirt beneath his feet. The island rumbled. The entire Sky Island shook violently as if struck by a magnitude 10 earthquake. The resourceful castaway bent his knees slightly to steady himself. At the island's edges, soil stretched and grew outward as if alive. The cramped space expanded visibly before his eyes, landmass swelling with every churn of earth. The thunderous rumble died down after a full minute. The stranded survivor scanned his surroundings, a flicker of shock crossing his face. The tiny 10-square-meter islet had expanded to a full 20 square m. Its size doubled outright. Amazing. The tenfold system user couldn't help but roar. The more space he had, the more he could accomplish. He immediately began planning the newly gained 10 square meters. Finished mapping out his plans. Suze felt a surge of refreshing clarity. Though it was deep into the night, he had no trace of sleepiness. Place the wooden cabin and purifier at the center as the core living zone. Leave the empty plot to the left for future farmland. The stretch along the right edge will be dedicated to fishing and storage. With his tenfold multiplier system paired with the water purifier, he completely escaped the threat of starvation and dehydration. Right now, all he could think about was growing stronger and surviving better in this brutal world. The stranded survivor walked over to the designated fishing zone and cast his line once more. The sea of clouds grew far more turbulent after dark. The pale gray mist deepened to pitch black, as if countless vengeful spirits writhed and roared within it. This time, Suze waited for ages. It was the dead of night, frigid wind making him shiver without pause before the float finally twitched. There was no violent thrashing, only a gentle downward tug. Suze reeled the line in with practiced ease and hauled his catch ashore. By the faint glow spilling from his cabin, he made out what lay on the ground. It was a glass drift bottle glowing dimly, its mouth sealed tight with a cork stopper. Curious, Suze picked up the bottle and pulled out the cork. There was no foot or blueprint inside, only a rolled sheepskin scroll. That Suze unrolled the scroll, and his pupils constricted sharply. The handwriting was messy and frantic, steeped in raw terror and despair. Whoever finds this, listen closely. Never. That place is a true abyss, hell itself. Only the clouds 100 meters down hold real treasure in the hope of survival. And beware, the clouds see tide in 7 days. They will climb up. All of them will climb up. The riding cut off abruptly, ending in a long smear of blood, as if the rider had been dragged away by something in their final moments. The clouds see tide in 7 days. They'll climb up onto the islands. The island builder spun sharply to stare at the churning black mist at the island's edge. Deep within that endless darkness, countless greedy eyes seemed fixed unblinkingly on his lone sky island. The tenfold system user drew a deep breath, staring at the blood-red words on the scroll as every hair on his body stood on end. The twisted, frantic script radiated suffocating despair. He flipped the scroll over and over, replaying the warning about the 7-day tide in his mind. This was no trivial prank in this absurd Sky Island world. Suze forced himself to calm down. He glanced at his shabby bamboo fishing rod. Its line only stretched 30 meters, a hidden safety measure for new survivors put in place by the system. If he could endure the first month, his rod would upgrade, letting him fish for far superior supplies 100 meters down. But first, he had to live through the so-called cloud sea tide in 7 days. As Suze raced through plans in his head, the regional channel icon in the bottom right corner of his vision began flashing wildly. He opened it to find a 1-minute-long voice message pinned at the top. The sender was a man named Xiaogang. His avatar a burly brute with a brutal fleshy face. Frowning, Suze tapped to play the audio. Not a single bite to eat. Then a shrill snap of a breaking fishing line cut through the audio, followed by the thunderous crack of island dirt crumbling. It's impossibly strong. Don't. There are jaws down there. Massive jaws. A dull splash echoed and the audio cut out entirely. The entire regional channel went silent. A full minute passed before someone typed a trembling message. He's dead. No question. There are marine monsters lurking under the cloud sea. The channel branded the reckless survivor insane, just about to copy his trick and splice more rope. This place is pure nightmare. Suze watched the panic spreading through the chat with cold detachment. Xiaogang's brutal death had proven the drift bottle's warning with bloody reality. The depths below 30 meters were an off-limits death zone. Defenses, alarm bells blared in Suze's mind. His 20-square-meter island was completely exposed. No barriers of any kind. If monsters climbed ashore, he'd have nowhere to hide. His wooden cabin was sturdy, but there was no telling if it could withstand attacks from unknown beasts. To stay alive, he needed to stockpile massive basic materials and build defensive structures. Suze opened the trading zone immediately. His water purifier turned out endless pure water, his greatest asset. Without hesitation, he listed 3 full bottles of newly produced water totaling 1,500 milliliters. Message privately for details. As soon as this listing went live, the regional channel erupted once more. It's Boss Suze again. Thank God. Enough for 1 bottle. As survivors rushed to place trade requests, the persistent Wong Tong popped back into the chat. A 100 timber for 1 bottle of water. He might as well rob us blind. Nobody buy starve before giving him a single resource. Once his water goes unsold, he'll slash prices. His words swayed a few gullible followers. He's right. This price is extortion. Reading the moral blackmail on screen, Suze almost laughed. These fools still hadn't grasped the truth of this world. Preaching morality and unity in a survival realm where human life meant nothing was utterly ridiculous. He couldn't be bothered typing a rebuttal and simply ignored the messages, as expected. Wong Tong's so-called alliance crumbled instantly, in the face of the primal urge to survive. 30 seconds hadn't passed before the crisp trading chime sounded again. The trade consumed 500 milliliters pure water. Obtain 100 timber. The trade consumed 500 milliliters pure water. Obtain 100 stone. The trade consumed 500 milliliters pure water. Obtain 100 dirt. All 3 bottles sold out immediately. The people who'd just been shouting for a boycott stared in shock. Someone who'd successfully bought water shot back instantly. Suze smiled contentedly at the surge of 300 basic materials filling his inventory. This was the power of monopoly. As long as he held the water purifier, he could endlessly harvest resources from every survivor in the zone. Materials were plentiful now, but he still hadn't gotten his hands on any defensive blueprints. Unfazed, Sus picked up his fishing rod, baited the hook, and cast the line into the churning cloud sea. The night deepened further, and eerie, hair-raising roars echoed from the mist, as if some terrible creatures were stirring awake in the darkness. About an hour later, the bamboo rod in his hands suddenly sank with immense weight. Susie sharpened. He planted his feet firmly, gripping the rod tight and hauling backward. The weight was staggering, far heavier than the treasure chest he'd reeled him before. The fishing line stretched taut, creaking dangerously under the strain. Sus dragged the resisting catch toward the surface. Sus gritted his teeth, the muscles in his arms bulging as he pulled upward with all his strength. A massive splash tore through the clouds. A heavy dark shape arsed through the air and crashed onto the sky island with a dull metallic clang. Gasping for breath, Sus stepped forward to examine his catch, by the faint glow of the wooden cabin. He made out what lay on the ground. It was a square iron crate. Its surface was coated in dark reddish-brown rust, and a huge brass padlock hung from its latch. Most unsettling of all, a pungent stench of blood seeped faintly through the crate's cracks, as if it held something freshly slaughtered inside. Sus stared hard at the blood-soaked iron crate, his brows knotted tightly together. In this bizarre Sky Island world, anything out of the ordinary could hide a deadly trap. He did not reach out to touch it recklessly. Instead, he pulled a heavy stone he had just traded for out of his backpack and crept cautiously toward the crate. A ruthless glint flashed in Sus's eyes. He lifted the stone, which weighed more than 10 pounds, and slammed it hard against the brass padlock. A deafening clang echoed, sending sparks flying everywhere. The padlock was already eaten away by rust, and that powerful blow crumpled it out of shape instantly. The island builder did not pause. He struck it 3 or 4 more times until the lock split completely and fell off. He nudged the crate lid open with the tip of his toe, then stepped sharply back to paces, ready to react to any sudden threat. Yet no monster leaped out, nor were there mangled body parts as he'd feared. That sharp metallic reek of blood drifted from a tattered rag lining the crate's bottom. Resting quietly atop the blood-stained rag were 2 items: an all-black military tactical dagger with a cold, menacing design and several small paper parcels tightly wrapped in oilskin. A sharp excitement entered Sus's gaze. He stepped forward immediately and picked them up. The catch contained military tactical dagger X1. The catch contained pack of common cabbage seeds X1. Pack of common tomato seeds 1. As soon as his fingers closed around the items, the mechanical voice in his head spoke right on cue. The tenfold effect responded again. Received military tactical daggers 10. The system confirmed the reward. Received packs of common cabbage seeds times 10. Packs of common tomato seeds times 10. A heartbeat later, 10 glinting tactical daggers and a small pile of vegetable seeds appeared neatly on the empty ground at Sus's feet. Sus picked up one dagger casually and hefted it in his palm. It had satisfying weight, a razor-sharp blade, serrations along the spine, and an anti-slip grip that fit perfectly in his hand. Top-tier gear. Sus openly praised it out loud. In a world where monster attacks could strike at any moment, a reliable melee weapon brought an indescribable sense of safety. He slipped one dagger straight through the leather belt at his waist, instantly feeling far more confident. The vegetable seeds were an unexpected bonus. They meant he would soon have fresh greens to replenish his vitamin intake. The other 8 go on the trade market to fleece everyone. A cold smirk tugged at Sus's lips. 10,000 people occupied this zone, and the vast majority had nothing but a shoddy fishing rod. They lacked any weapon to defend themselves when danger struck. The appearance of melee weapons would send the whole zone into an uproar. He opened the trade district immediately and listed all 8 tactical daggers for sale. Traded item military tactical dagger 1. Message privately to negotiate details. 8. Essential for slaying monsters and surviving. Limited stock. This guy must be cheating. And this big shot's pulling weapons out of the void. Sus's private message inbox flooded instantly. Hundreds of messages scrolling without pause like a waterfall. All kinds of characters crawled out of the woodwork. A man named Lyjinin messaged him privately. The determined fisherman let out a cold laugh. Reading the message, he answered with a cold retort telling Lee to take his 50 million and spend it in the afterlife. Then blocked him without a second thought, right after. A woman named Jiangshu sent a message dripping with self-righteous indignation. Selling them at such an inflated price is profiting off humanity's crisis. Sus was disgusted by her moral blackmail and shot a reply back. He blocked her, too, for all the fools spamming him. There were also quite a few survivors with real resources. Among 10,000 people in the zone, a handful were absurdly lucky or grinders who fished without pause for supplies. In less than 10 minutes, Sus received several viable trade offers. The determined fisherman sorted through the offers quickly and traded away all 8 daggers. Bright flashes lit the air as dozens of Sky Island foundation stones, plus mountains of wood, stone, and dirt, materialized in his backpack. This single batch of trade secured his initial capital for development. He pulled the dirt out immediately, roped off a roughly 2 square meter patch on the left edge of his island beside the cabin, spread the thick soil evenly and turned it into a simple farm plot. Afterward, he carefully tore open the seed wrappers and scattered the cabbage and tomato seeds evenly across the dirt. Consider yourselves lucky. Suze picked up a plastic bottle full of purified water and soaked the newly sown soil thoroughly. A damp, earthy tang rose from the dirt as if it hummed with some special energy. The fortified survivor was fully focused on tending his farm plot when a shrill creaking sound suddenly came from behind him. He spun around sharply. The bamboo fishing rod he'd wedged in a rock crack for automated fishing was bent into an extreme arch, ready to snap into at any second. Something huge on the line. Suze's eyes widened. He dropped the water bottle, sprinted over in one stride, and clamped a tight grip on the rod handle. As soon as his hands wrapped around it, a terrifying yank surged up from deep within the sea of clouds, nearly dragging him rod and all off the island's edge into the abyss. The fortified survivor planted his feet hard into the dirt at the island's edge, leaned his entire weight backward and tensed his core muscles like solid rock. The pull from beneath the clouds was absurdly powerful. This was nothing like hauling regular supplies. It felt like a tug of war against a charging rhinoceros. The bamboo rod creaked under the strain, thin spiderweb cracks splitting its surface. The rough handle rubbed his palms raw, blood welling at the webbing of his thumbs. Yet he gritted his teeth and refused to let go. He knew one truth: the stronger the pull, the more valuable whatever was hooked below. This brutal stalemate dragged on for 24 minutes. Suze's stamina drained rapidly. Sweat soaked his back and dripped steadily off his chin. The thrashing far below the clouds finally weakened, the brute force fading away. The resourceful castaway seized the opening sharply, drew a deep breath, veins bulging along his arms. He roared, pouring every last ounce of strength into a violent upward heave. Splashing waves crashed, the churning gray sea of clouds tore open, and a weathered wooden barrel, dripping with mist, was hauled violently into the air. The barrel arsed through the sky and crashed heavily onto the dirt at Suze's feet with a dull thud. The resourceful castaway collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, his arms trembling uncontrollably. He swiped sweat from his face and scrambled over to the barrel. The barrel looked ancient, its rims coated in black moss. He pried the lid open hard. It was empty inside, save for rolled sheepskin parchment resting on the bottom. Another blueprint. Suze's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly grabbed the parchment. Simple wooden fence 1. Simple wooden fence blueprint unlocks fence construction upon learning. Build cost 5 wood per meter. Provides basic physical defense to block small beast and low-tier monster incursions. The mechanical voice echoed in his head. Right on schedule, the system's multiplication function engaged. The interface recorded the successful multiplier. Received blueprints. Simple wooden fence times 10. Staring at the thick stack of blueprints in his hands, Suze's eyes blazed with excitement. It was like getting a pillow right when he was ready to sleep. He'd been fretting without pause over the cloud tide arriving in 7 days, unsure how to fend off the monsters that would climb onto the island. With these wooden fences, a full perimeter wall around his island would send his safety level soaring. Learn Suze crushed one blueprint immediately. Knowledge of fence construction flooded straight into his mind. He glanced at his backpack. He traded daggers and water for over 1,000 wood, more than enough to build everything he needed. Construct. Standing at the center of his island, Suze activated the build function with a thought. Streams of white light flying toward the island's perimeter. A steady clattering of timber assembling filled the air, as waist-high fences rose all around the shoreline. Thick rounded logs sharpened at the tops, nailed side by side. Within mere minutes, the entire 20-square-meter island was fully enclosed by sturdy wooden fencing with only a small hinged wooden gate, left open by the fishing zone. Suze stepped forward and shoved the fence hard. It did not shift an inch, rock solid. Staring at his new defensive perimeter, the heavy weight of worry lifted off his chest at last. Meanwhile, panic spread like wildfire through the zone chat. Everyone, watch out. There are way more shadowy figures in the clouds now. Those monsters are swimming upward. Just sleep on bare dirt. Suze shot a cold smile, reading the desperate cries in the channel. These terrified survivors were prime targets for his trades. He opened the trade district again and listed the remaining 9 simple wooden fence blueprint listings. The listing accepted private negotiations. 9 note. Life-saving construction blueprint blocks monster attacks. Only 3 foundation stones per copy. For 1 heartbeat, The chat channel fell silent after the listing posted, then erupted into a frantic buying spree for wealthy survivors holding spare materials. 3 foundation stones in exchange for survival was an unbeatable deal. All 9 blueprints sold out in under 5 minutes. 27 Sky Island foundation stones materialized directly in Sue's backpack. The era of island infrastructure expansion begins. Suz eyed his haul in the backpack with satisfaction. With these foundation stones, he could expand his island drastically whenever he pleased. Night fell completely, plunging the entire sea of clouds into pitch-black darkness. Only faint light seeped out from Suz's wooden cabin. He sat on his wooden bed, gnawing on a rock-hard black bread loaf and washing it down with purified water, forcing each mouthful down. The food was coarse and flavorless. Yet in this hellish void, a full stomach was a luxury countless survivors could only dream of. He let out a long breath, the tight tension in his nerves easing slightly. But just as he prepared to lie down and rest, a bone-chilling, scraping sound cut through the silent night. Scratch, creak, scratch. It sounded like something sharp breaking violently against timber. The noise grated unbearably, sending chills racing up his spine. It came clearly from outside his wooden fence perimeter. Something had climbed onto the island. Scratch, creak. The scraping amplified in the dead quiet like a saw blade dragging back and forth across Suz's frayed nerves. Every muscle in his body locked rigid. He shot upright off the bed, drew the tactical dagger from his waist. In one fluid motion, his gaze sharp and feral as a wolf's. Something really climbed up. Suz lightened his footsteps, moving like a poised stalking leopard toward the cabin window. He peered through the crack, fixed on the direction of the noise. Outside, the darkness was absolute, only faint. Eerie glimmers flickered occasionally as the cloud sea churned. The sound originated from the fence on the island's right side. Suz tightened his grip on the dagger, held his breath, and kicked the wooden gate open hard. He rolled forward with the momentum, pressing himself flat behind a section of fence. The creaking scraping continued unabated, gritting his teeth Suz upright. Dagger raised high and squinted down through the dim glow. A heartbeat later, he froze. No fanged, grotesque monsters lurked beyond the fence. No scaled tentacles snaking over the logs. Tangled across the fence post was a long thorny vine swept up by gale winds. The vine was jet black lined with backward curving thorns. It whipped back and forth in the frigid wind howling over the clouds, its barbs scraping the fence planks to create that terrifying scratching noise. The stranded survivor swore under his breath. His taut nerves unwound all immediately, and he realized cold sweat soaked his entire back. Thought the monsters showed up early. He hooked the vine free with his dagger and tossed it back into the sea of clouds. Though it was a false alarm, that midnight fright served as a harsh warning. The Sky Island was blind at night, without any source of light. He could not see a single thing happening beyond his fence. If real monsters had crept up just now, the darkness would have left him at a devastating disadvantage. Even torches will do. Suz made a mental note and turned back into the cabin. He slept restlessly that night. The tactical dagger tucked beneath his pillow, the slightest rustle jolted him awake. Dawn finally broke. Pale gray light spilling once more over the endless cloud sea. Dark circles heavy under his eyes. Suz stepped out of the cabin. His first stop was the farm plot he'd cleared the night before. He froze the moment he drew near. Tender green sprouts dotted the previously bare dirt. After only one night, the cabbage and tomato seeds had not only germinated, they grew shockingly fast, already to 3 cm tall. This growth rate's ridiculous. Like cheating, the stranded survivor knelt down to study the young shoots closely. It hit him instantly. This was no ordinary soil. A mix of the Sky Island's native dirt and the purified water he poured seemed to carry a faint growth, accelerating property. At this pace, he would have fresh vegetables to eat within days. In high spirits, Suz marched to the fishing zone and cast his line back into the cloud sea. Survival pressure left him no time to slack off. Though he now had water and perimeter defenses, his food stock only held a few dry black bread loaves and cured meat. Eating nothing, but that was unpalatable and slowed his stamina recovery. Luck favored him heavily that day. In less than 2 hours, the float plunged sharply underwater. Suz reeled the rod up with practiced speed, pulling hard against the line. A splash echoed and a square metal tin alongside a small cloth sack crashed onto the island ground. The tenfold system user hurried over to pick them up. The catch contained Conspam X1. The catch contained full flint steel fire starter set 1. The island builder pumped his fist inhalation. The catch triggered another tenfold increase. The system confirmed another reward. The interface acknowledged the successful catch. A flash of light swept across the ground, piling up a small mountain of luncheon meat. Cans with 10 meat flint and steel sets lined up beside it. Sus grabbed one flint kit immediately, then rummaged through his backpack for drywood shavings and straw. He scraped the flint hard. Crackle sparks showered onto the straw, and a thin wisp of smoke curled upward. The tenfold system user puffed his cheeks and blew gently. Flames flared to life instantly. Finally, fire. He quickly stacked stones into a simple fire pit and stoked the flames brighter. Then he pried open a luncheon meat can with his dagger, skewered the meat on a wooden stick, and held it over the fire to roast. Sus swallowed hard, ignoring the scalding heat, and took a huge bite. Crispy outside, tender inside, brimming with salty meat flavor. This hot, calorie-dense fatty food quickly soothed his ravaged stomach. Sus polished off 2 full cans of roasted luncheon meat in one go, drank half a bottle of purified water, and let out a contented belch. Sitting beside the fire, he opened the region chat channel. The channel was flooded with despairing messages. Last night's brutal cold snap had left countless survivors suffering terribly. The wind raged all night. So cold, so hungry. Reading these desperate posts, Sus patted his warm, full belly. He had a full stomach, clean drinking water, and a fire for warmth. He might as well have been glamping in the wilderness still. He knew his clothes were far too thin, and he needed to prepare ahead for harsh weather. He pulled up the trade board and posted a new listing. Sleeping bag or rare materials, DM for details. As soon as this post went live, survivors shivering and lightheaded from starvation stared at the words luncheon meat. With ravenous green eyes, a ferocious new scramble for supplies erupted across the region channel. The determined fisherman sat calmly by his fire, watching the chaos unfold with cold indifference. In this survival game, he was already leagues ahead of every other human trapped here. Yet, it was nowhere near enough. The cloud sea tide in 7 days would be the true trial. Only 4 days remained until the cloud sea tide. Chill dawn winds sliced across the floating island like blades, rousing Sus from sleep beside the fire. He rubbed his stiff cheeks and headed straight for the farm plot next to his wooden hut. The cabbage and tomato seeds he planted earlier had grown at an absurd hormone-fueled pace, nourished by the island's magical soil and purified water. Overnight, tender green leaves had unfurled to palm size, their vivid, vibrant hues striking against the gray, lifeless wasteland of floating land masses. The fortified survivor grinned in satisfaction, his mood vastly lifted. He turned back to the fire pit, rekindled the flames with flint and steel, pried open another luncheon meat can to roast until grease bubbled off it, and enjoyed a hearty breakfast paired with sweet purified water. Heat flooded his insides, filling every muscle with renewed strength. In this brutal world where a single sip of water caused blood to obtain, Sus lived in utter comfort. Just as Sus reached for his fishing rod to start another day of angling, a shrill crimson system alert blared inside every survivor's head immediately. Survivor count in this zone has dropped below 8,000. Mortality rate hits 20. Hidden system condition triggered. Regional leaderboards unlocked. Regional leaderboards activated. Current rankings available. Floating island size rank. Prosperity rank. Notice rankings reset weekly. Top 10 players on each board receive a mysterious survival treasure chest from the system. Fight to stay alive, survivors. The emotionless mechanical voice struck every person like a sledgehammer to the chest. Sus's smile faded, his expression turning grave. Down below 8,000. Only a few days have passed and over 100 people are dead. He drew a shocked breath, though he knew this world was merciless. The staggering elimination rate sent a chill down his spine. Some starved to death, others perished from thirst, countless froze solid overnight, and a handful ignored warnings to cast their lines to deep, dragged into the abyss by monsters lurking beneath the cloud sea. Human life here was worth less than grass. No time for sentimentality. Sus tapped the newly glowing leaderboards icon in the corner of his holographic panel. He needed to see how many dangerous competitors hid in this region. First, he opened the floating island size rank. First place, Sus Island area 20 meters. Second place, Ba Island area 12 meters. Third place, Lai Jiangur Island area 11 meters. Fourth to 10,000th place. The resourceful castaway raised an eyebrow and switched to the adjacent prosperity rank. First place, Sus construction-owned sturdy wooden hut, basic water purifier, simple wooden fence, basic farm plot. Second place, constructions owned, ramshackle wooden hut, simple wooden fence. Third place, Zhanggu. Constructions owned, ramshackle wooden hut. No surprise at all, Sus let out a cold laugh. Blessed with the overpowered tenfold multiplier system, his stockpile of supplies and base development left every other survivor far behind. He claimed first place on both leaderboards, with stats that completely dwarfed the competition by a massive margin. As soon as the leaderboards went live, the stagnant region channel erupted in chaos. Messages scrolling too fast to read. He's definitely cheating. 20 square meters. Check the prosperity rank. A sturdy hut. The blueprint promised a working purifier. He even built fences and farmland. And he's practically got a villa on his island. No wonder he had so much purified water and tactical daggers for sale yesterday. He's already soaring ahead. The ultimate survival expert messages flooded the chat without pause. Every survivor stunned speechless by the sudden leaderboard reveal. In a realm where most people starved and lacked even basic shelter, Sue's stats were a crushing dimensional divide, blinding everyone with envy. Countless private message requests poured in like snowflakes, begging for handouts, pleading to be taken under his wing or feigning misery to leech supplies for free. Suz curled his lips into a sneer as he scanned the messages. At that moment, a glaring new post popped up in the region channel sent by Zhao Tianba, the man trapped in second place beneath Suz on both rankings. Zhao Tianba's avatar was a bald brute with a vicious face, his tone thick with bitter jealousy. He just got absurdly lucky and exploited some system glitch. This is humanity's fight for survival, and he hoards all those supplies. He should hand them over to share with everyone. As soon as Zhao Tianba's words appeared, several envious copycats jumped in to agree exactly. This isn't fair. Suz, don't be so selfish. Greater power means greater responsibility. Make him share the water purifier for everyone. The island builder nearly laughed at the nauseating moral blackmail on his screen. These idiots had warped logic beyond belief. Even now, they clung to this ridiculous demand that the successful feed everyone else. He didn't even bother typing a retort. In this merciless survival world, strength was the only truth. Only 3 days remained until the cloud sea tide warned of on the parchment. He had no time to waste on these attention-seeking clowns. He closed the channel and ignored the noise, with a thought to shut down his virtual panel, blocking out all the commotion entirely. He drew a deep breath against the howling cold wind sweeping his floating island, then picked up his frayed bamboo fishing rod once more. His defenses and supplies were still far too lacking to survive the incoming tide. In 3 days' time ticked away second by second. The cloud sea churned through daylight, yet remained relatively calm. He sat motionless at the island's edge like a statue, eyes fixed rigidly on his bobber, floating above the mist. Hours slipped by, and he caught nothing but driftwood and clumps of foul-smelling garbage. Night fell fast. The darkness this evening was deeper than all prior nights, pitch black, no visibility at all. Violent gales raged around the floating island, wailing like tormented ghosts. The stranded survivor could barely make out the muddy ground beneath his feet by the faint glow leaking from his wooden hut behind him. Cold crept up his pant legs, sending violent shivers through his body. Still, he refused to back down, clinging tight to his fishing rod. Deep into the night, as Suz's eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion, the bamboo pole in his hands lurched downward violently. The pull signaled a massive catch. Suz jolted fully awake, adrenaline surging through his veins. The pole was monstrous, the fishing line humming taut in the dark, threatening to snap any second. He planted his feet deep in the mud, twisted his waist, and leaned backward at a dramatic angle, gritting his teeth. His arm muscles bulged, veins popping prominently beneath his skin. Vicious thrashing echoed from the depths of the dark cloud sea below. Whatever he'd hoped fought desperately to drag itself down. Suz did not relent an inch, holding fast and reeling it toward him little by little. This tug of war dragged on for over 10 minutes, his arms burning as if they might tear from their sockets. Finally, the resistance from below weakened. Now Suz roared, yanking the fishing rod upward hard. A shape burst through the swirling mist, flying into the air before crashing heavily onto the island's mud with a dull thud. The determined fisherman gasped for air, rubbing his aching wrist, and stepped forward in the dark. By the faint firelight, his fingers closed around a rigid waterproof plastic case. The tenfold system user pried open the case's latches. Inside rested a matte black tactical flashlight with a rugged utilitarian frame, heavy and solid in his grip. Its shell forged from tough aerospace aluminum alloy. The catch contained one high-intensity tactical flashlight. Before Suz could celebrate, the familiar mechanical system tone echoed in his mind once more. The system detected the new supply. The tenfold multiplier activated, and the plastic case on the ground blurred for a split second. And 10 identical tactical flashlights lined up neatly at Suz's feet. The island builders celebrated the breakthrough. In this electricity-free world where nights were as black as ink, limited vision was a fatal vulnerability. With these flashlights, he would no longer be blind after dark. The determined fisherman grabbed one flashlight immediately and fumbled for the rear power switch. Click! A blinding beam of white light tore through the darkness, shooting straight out across the distant cloud sea. The beam was intensely powerful, illuminating a dozen meters ahead, laying the churning gray mist fully bare. The brightness was ideal. Sus swept the light back and forth excitedly, the brilliant glow wrapping him in unmatched safety. As Sus savored his new treasure, the region channel icon in the corner of his vision flashed frantically, accompanied by a shrill crimson alarm. Frowning, he opened the channel. A 30-second voice message was pinned to the very top. Its Cinder's avatar faded gray, the marker of a dead survivor. Sus hit play, and a blood-curdling scream exploded across the floating island. Help. It's climbing up. It crawled up the fishing line. There's something under the cloud sea. The screams mixed with splintering wood, collapsing mud, and horrid, wet, crunching, chewing sounds. Then silence. The entire chat channel fell dead quiet. Over a full minute passed before someone typed a trembling message. So bad he tore his clothes to twist extra line onto his rod, trying to fish deeper for food. And then this. Several survivors condemned the decision as madness. There really are monsters beneath the cloud sea. It's terrifying. Panic spread through the channel like a plague, a heavy shadow settling over every survivor's heart. Sus closed the channel without a flicker of emotion. That reckless fool had sacrificed his life to prove the rules were unforgiving. Depths below 30 meters were an untouchable death zone. 3 days left. The fortified survivor tightened his grip on the tactical flashlight, his gaze turning ice cold. Once the tide arrived, the beasts hiding in the abyss would surge forth en masse. He had to prepare every possible defense to face this true life or death trial. Chilled dawn winds thick with mist roused Sus from light sleep. He rubbed his gritty eyes and sat up on his wooden bed. He had slept only a few hours, yet in this perpetually high-stress world, even a short rest was a luxury. Grabbing the tactical flashlight beside his bed, he pushed open the wooden hut door and stepped outside. The sky had not fully brightened, the cloud sea still shrouded in oppressive gray haze. The resourceful castaway flipped on the flashlight, its piercing beam slicing through dimness and lighting up the entire floating island, as if it were broad daylight. His first stop was the farm plot to the left of the hut. As soon as he drew near, Sus's eyes flew wide open in shock. These things mutated overnight. The palm-sized seedlings had undergone explosive growth overnight and fully matured. Lush cabbage leaves were thick and juicy, each plant as big as a wash basin. The tomato vines beside them hung heavy with plump, glossy red fruits dotted with dewdrops, releasing a sweet, tempting fragrance. The island's soil, plus purified water. This growth speed is absurd. The stranded survivor swallowed hard in this desperate wasteland, where everyone survived on rock-hard black bread and dried meat. Fresh vegetables were a royal luxury. Sus drew his tactical dagger, cut down a full cabbages, and plucked 5 ripe tomatoes. He walked over to the basic water purifier, filled his hands with clean water, and washed the produce thoroughly. No cooking pot. It was no trouble for Sus. He retrieved an empty large luncheon meat can from the day before, cleaned it, filled it with water, and set it atop the fire pit. He struck flint and steel. Flames quickly lapped at the can's base. Once the water boiled, Sus tossed and chopped cabbage and tomatoes, then scooped out half a can of luncheon meat, sliced it into chunks, and dumped them into the soup. Minutes later, a rich, savory aroma drifted all across the floating island. The sweet tang of tomatoes, the fresh, mild aroma of cabbage, mingled with the rich, fatty scent of luncheon meat. As everything churned violently in boiling water, Sus swallowed a massive mouthful of saliva. He could wait no longer. Grabbing a chunk of cabbage dripping with meat broth using crude chopsticks whittled from wooden sticks and shoving it straight into his mouth. Hot, hot, hot. So good. The crisp sweetness of vegetables and salty savor of meat exploded across his tongue, stimulating every single taste bud. Ignoring the scalding heat, Sus lifted his metal tin can and gulped down broth and meat in loud slurps. He devoured the meal in record time, not a single drop of soup left behind. A warm surge rose from his stomach, spreading through every limb and vein. The fortified survivor let out a contented burp, feeling thoroughly revitalized, brimming with boundless energy. Full and fueled, time to work. Refreshed, Sus strode over to the fishing spot, baited his line skillfully, and cast the rod out into the roiling sea of clouds. Luck seemed to favor him greatly today. Barely an hour passed before the float plunged sharply underwater. The hook had caught something. Sus dropped into a wide horse stance, gripping the bamboo rod tightly with both hands and heaving upward. The pull was surprisingly mild this time. With minimal effort, he hauled his catch out of the cloud sea. A heavy impact followed. A water-soaked green canvas sack crashed onto the muddy ground. The tenfold system user stepped forward and unfastened the sack's buckle. Inside rested a brand new black folding tool. The catch contained one multifunctional engineer shovel. Multifunctional engineer shovel forged from high tensile alloy integrating shovel, pickaxe, saw, hatchet, and more. It is not only a prime construction tool, but also an excellent close-order self-defense weapon. Score. Recognition flashed across Suze's face. The system registered the new supplies. The multiplier converted one reward into 10. Flashes of light flickered without pause. 10 weighty engineer shovels lying neatly before Suze. He picked one up at random, unfolded it, and hefted it in his palm. Solid and heavy, its sharpened edge could chop what is as easily as an axe. A defensive blueprint instantly took shape in Suze's mind. Just as he prepared to get to work, the regional chat channel in the bottom right corner of his vision erupted with activity. Zhao Qianbo was throwing another fit in the channel, but this time, instead of hurling insults, he bragged relentlessly. Uncontainable glee and arrogance oozed from Xiao Yanba's tone, pure horror. In a few days, an unthinkable catastrophe will sweep the entire sea of clouds. His words sent shock waves through the survivors, already skittish after last night's fatal casualty. What catastrophe? Brother Hia, don't scare us. Save all of us. Zhao Tian bobbed his greedy fangs. Share it, spots limited. He was shamelessly exploiting their information gap to bleed them dry. Yet, when staring death in the face, rationality crumbles. It did not take long for survivors to cave in. Swap it for the intel. Suze watched the farce unfold and shook his head with a cold smirk. Foolish but thought he held earth-threatening secrets when all he knew of was the incoming cloud sea tide? The island builder had learned everything ages ago from drift bottles and far more thoroughly than Xiao Yanba ever could. Let him prat on when the tide hits. We'll see if his pathetic horde can hold back the monsters. Tuning out the noisy channel entirely, Suze closed the interface. He grabbed an engineer shovel and marched toward the wooden palisades, lining the floating island's edge. Defense construction begins now. Zhao Timba flees survivors without pause in the regional chat, swimming in looted supplies. Terrified of the looming catastrophe, countless survivors surrendered their hard-earned survival resources in exchange for a slim chance to live. Staring at the mountain of materials stacked in his inventory, Zhao Tianba's ego inflated to an unbearable degree. He fancied himself ruler of this zone, no longer intimidated by Suze, who had always outmatched him. Xiaoba tapped Suze's avatar and sent an outrageously arrogant private message. Otherwise, wait to get torn to shreds by monsters drowning in terror. Mid-digging, Suze's private message alert pinged. He paused his labor, opened the message, and laughed in exasperation. He sent the message and blocked Xiaoba in one fluid motion. Not a single extra syllable wasted on a full blind to reality. Closing the interface, Suze tightened his grip on the multifunctional engineer shovel once more. His current mission: turn this entire floating island into an impenetrable iron fortress. The wooden palisades can hold off ordinary beasts, but swarms or oversized monsters will break through in minutes. A second line of defense must be built inside the fence. Swinging the shovel hard, Suze dug furiously right against the inner side of the wooden barrier. Though the island's soil was damp, the razor-sharp shovel sliced through it like tofu. His goal? Dig a circular trench wrapping the entire island, 1/2 meter wide and 1 meter deep. The work drained massive stamina. Suze stripped off his shirt, bare-chested, sweat dripping down to fine muscle lines into the mud. He worked like an indefatigable excavator. Shovelful after shovelful of dirt moved. 3 grueling hours later, a neat ring trench encircled the island, but he was far from finished. The resourceful castaway pulled piles of excess lumber traded earlier from his backpack, sharpened one end of each plank with his tactical dagger. He then planted these sharpened stakes densely along the trench floor, all points facing upward. He patted dirt off his hands, satisfied with his handiwork. Now, any monster breaking through the outer palisades would tumble straight into the trench, impaled through and through by the jagged wooden spikes. After back-breaking labor, Suze's stomach rumbled with hunger again. He walked to the fishing spot, splashed cold water on his face, and cast his rod once more. Dusk fell, the setting sun bleeding crimson. The churning sea of clouds dyed in airy dark red. An unsettling sight to behold. The bamboo rod in his hands jolted violently. Suze hauled back with practiced precision. A square camouflage cardboard box flew onto the island. Suze hurried over to pick it up, eyes blazing with excitement the moment he saw its label. High-calorie self-heating military MRE. Military standard ration including compressed biscuits, dehydrated beef, chocolate, energy drinks, and more. Reheat with a tiny amount of water, delivering massive calories and long-lasting satiety. Hell yes, this is a lifesaver. When the tide arrived, monsters could climb up at any second. He would have zero time to build fires and cook. These self-heating rations solved all his meal troubles completely. The interface confirmed the recovered materials, the tenfold multiplier engaged. Crates, not single packets. In the next instant, a mountain of camouflage cardboard crates materialized at Suze's feet. Cackling, Suze tore open one ration pack and poured in a splash of purified water. Within seconds, the heating pouch reacted violently, billowing hot steam. Minutes later, a steaming bowl of dehydrated beef rice was ready. He shoveled mouthfuls greedily, savoring the warmth spreading through his gut from the high-energy meal. Full and rested, Sis hauled all 10 crates into his wooden cabin for storage. He switched on his high-lumen flashlight, shining its beam deep into the cloud sea. Only 2 days remained until the tide. Dramatic shifts swept through the sea of clouds climate. The once mild cool breeze turned biting frigid, temperatures plummeting more than 10 degrees Celsius. Thick clouds churned furiously like boiling water. Low rumbling booms echoing from below as if some abomination stirred violently in the depths. Panic hit a fever pitch in the regional chat. God, look at the cloud sea. It's turned black. Monsters, they're coming. The cold is unbearable. Tell us now. Faced with endless pleas, Ba, once busy fleecing everyone, fell into an eerie silence. His tattered journal held no survival countermeasures, only the single phrase, the catastrophe. He trembled alone in his ramshackle cabin, just as terrified as everyone else. The determined fisherman frowned against the stinging cold wind. Temperatures keep dropping. This cabin's sturdy, but wind still seeps through the cracks. He sprang into action, digging mounds of soil with his engineer shovel, mixing mud with water and with shavings to make thick clay plaster. He smothered every single crevice of the cabin wall with the mud from the inside, sealing all gaps tight for full insulation reinforcement. Once finished, the cabin retained heat vastly better. By afternoon, Sus returned to the fishing spot. The closer the tide drew, the heavier his sense of foreboding grew. Palisades and spiked trenches only offered passive defense. He needed means to strike back, a fighting chance even against colossal beast. Heaven, Sus prayed silently. As if answering his plea, a terrifying yank ripped through his bamboo rod. Creak. The cracked bamboo bent into a perilous U-shape, threatening to splinter apart at any second. This pull's insane. Sus's feet carved to deep furrows into the mud. Nearly dragged straight off the floating island's edge, he roared, firing every muscle in his waist to plant his stance firm. The stranded survivor forced the catch upward, burning every ounce of strength, veins bulging on his forearms. He wrenched backward with all his might. A massive tear split the cloud sea open. A heavy black rectangular metal crate hurtled onto the island with a howl. Slamming into the mud and carving a shallow crater, the fortified survivor gasped for air. Both arms numb from the strain. Shaking out his limbs, he strode to the black crate, forged from heavy-duty alloy, its surface etched with cold metallic grain. The resourceful castaway pried the latches open with his tactical dagger and lifted the lid. A thick whiff of machine oil washed over him. Resting neatly inside lay a sleek, futuristic all-black precision weapon. Wide, thick composite limbs fitted with a complex pulley system. Its stock sanded smooth, glinting with deadly cold luster. Beside the crossbow sat bundled arrows shimmering with metallic sheen. The catch contained 1 tactical compound crossbow. The catch contained 20 times alloy armor-piercing bolts. Tactical compound crossbow. High-precision, long-range lethal weapon equipped with labor-saving pulley system and optical scope. Devastating firepower easily piercing the skulls of low-tier monsters. Sus's breath hitched. A ranged weapon. The system acknowledged the fresh catch. The system's multiplier responded. Blinding white light flashed. Overjoyed, Sus grabbed 1 crossbow, its weight substantial in his grasp. He stepped his foot into the cocking stirrup and held the string back with both hands. Click, the top bow string locked firmly on the trigger. He slid an alloy bolt into the track, raised the crossbow, and lined the optical scope on a thick wooden palisade post 10 meters away. Sus's gaze turned sharp, and he squeezed the trigger. The crossbow string snapped forward. A deep hum vibrated through the bow as the bolt streaked forward like a black lightning bolt. A wet impact followed. The solid log, as thick as a grown man's thigh, was pierced clean through by the alloy bolt. The arrowhead vanished into empty space beyond the fence with splinters flying everywhere. This penetration is monstrous. Staring at the clean hole through the board through the timber, Sus drew a sharp breath in awe. With 10 tactical crossbows and 200 armor-piercing bolts, his floating island's defensive network was fully complete. Long distanciant sniping with crossbows. Close-quarters counterattacks with spiked trenches and engineer shovels. Bring them on. Crossbow raised. Sus stood at the island's edge, staring coldly down at the churning charcoal gray sea of clouds below. Darkness deepened. Fewer than 48 hours remaining until the cloud sea tide warned of on the parchment scroll. Temperatures on the floating island plummeted to freezing point. Gale winds sliced across faces like blades burning raw. The regional chat channel descended into total chaos. The cause was simple. Zhaotianba, who'd boasted without pause about his secret catastrophe intel, could no longer keep up his charade. As conditions grew grimmer, survivors who traded all their life-giving supplies for his. Supposed knowledge spammed his tag without pause, begging for defensive strategies. After stammering for ages, Tiyama finally spilled the truth. All the journal says is the catastrophe. Silence blanketed the chat for a heartbeat. Then a vicious flame war erupted instantly. The accusation of fraud spread quickly. Low-life thief, Shaoimba, everyone band together. Utterly doomed. All of us will perish on this pathetic island once the catastrophe hits. Despair and rage spread rampantly through the channel. Xiao Tiyama attempted to snap back with petty insults at first, but was soon drowned out by thousands of furious messages, too terrified to send another word. Sitting inside his warm cabin, munching hot self-heating MRE, Sus watched the chat farce with a cold sneer. Fools stay fools, fighting among themselves with death breathing down their necks. None of them knew immediately. The first month passed and the system's newbie protection expired. Their fishing rods would undergo a massive upgrade. Current maximum line length 30 meters. Post-upgrade 100 meters flat, down in the 100-meter deep cloud sea depths. Supply variety and quality would skyrocket dramatically. But first, they needed to survive the incoming tide. Just as Suze was about to close the channel and get back to work, a private message suddenly popped up. The sender was Wang Chong, whose avatar depicted a scrawny man with shifty rat-like eyes. This has to be top-tier crafting material. The stranded survivor raised an eyebrow and opened the item screenshot the man had sent. It was an ordinary rock coated in some unknown fluorescent powder, crudely daubed. Smudged mud was even visible along its uneven edges where the coating hadn't been spread smooth. A cold, vicious glint flashed across Suze's eyes with deadly danger closing in. These people had completely thrown all morality out the window. They'd stooped to any despicable trick just to swindle food and water. If he didn't teach them a harsh lesson, more of these pests would keep pestering him without pause. Without another word, Suze opened his inventory, took a screenshot of the stat panel for his tactical crossbow glinting with frigid metallic sheen, and sent it straight to the district group channel, tagging along a line of text. As soon as the screenshot hit the chat, the channel went dead silent, as if someone had choked every speaker's voice. A full 30 seconds passed before the entire chat exploded into chaos. A crossbow. This is actual modern weaponry. High-precision optical scope, alloy armor-piercing bolts, that firepower. One shot could punch straight through a human skull. The district recognized the act as suicidal. Totally insane. Respect to Grandpa Su. May Grandpa Su live forever. Ho, that penetration power. Those stats. This is the king of melee weapons. His shoddy fishing rod slipped from his grasp and clattered to the mud, and a huge wet patch spread across the crotch of his pants, hands shaking violently. He spammed desperate apology private messages to Suze. He even dropped to his knees in the muck and banged his forehead against the ground. He did this a dozen times, terrified Suze would hold a grudge. The tenfold system user let out a cold scoff, ignored every private message and closed the panel outright. His intimidation had worked. These petty crooks wouldn't dare harass him again until they figured out exactly what he was packing. Finally, some peace. Back to work. The tenfold system user pushed open the wooden door and strode toward the fishing zone. At the edge of his floating island against the howling gale, the wind raged so hard it nearly knocked him off his feet. Suze used his entrenching tool to dig a pit in the dirt, wedging his feet firmly inside to steady himself before casting his fishing line far out into the churning ash-gray cloud sea. Minutes ticked by one after another. Frigid dampness whipped on the gale, roaring around the floating island like hordes of invisible beasts. For full hours dragged on, the float tossed wildly in the wind. Yet nothing tugged at the line once. Just as Suze figured he'd catch nothing that day, the bamboo fishing rod in his hands suddenly lurched downward. The pole was not ferocious, yet unbelievably heavy, as if he'd hooked a massive block of pig iron. A new bite tightened the line. Suze focused instantly. He braced his core, gripped the rod handle tight, and hauled back with all his strength. The line tightened until its fibers groaned. Suze hauled the violent catch toward the surface inch by inch. Suze roared, veins bulging on his forearms. He stumbled backward, leveraging his full body weight to yank upward hard. The murky gray clouds tore apart, and a square red crate went flying through the air before crashing heavily into the mud. Gasping for breath, Suze hurried over. It was a crate crafted from heavy-duty waterproof material, marked with a stark white cross dead center. Medical supplies. Suze's heart hammered wildly as he pried open the crate latches. The catch contained one first aid medical kit. First aid medical kit contents: 1 box high-purity broad-spectrum antibiotics, 1 box potent painkillers, 5 rolls sterile medical gauze, 1 bottle medical alcohol, 1 set surgical blades plus suturing thread and needles. Staring at the supplies inside, Sue's breathing grew heavy, 10,000 times more valuable than food or water. The tenfold function responded without delay. A brilliant flash of white light swept over him, and 10 identical red waterproof crates lined up neatly at his feet. This is amazing. Thrilled, Sue slammed a fist against the wooden fence beside him. 10 medical kits meant 10 full boxes of antibiotics and 10 boxes of painkillers. With the apocalyptic tide fast approaching, these supplies were effectively 10 extra lives. As long as a monster didn't bite his head clean off instantly, he could survive even the most gruesome wounds. Maxed out defenses. The island builder carefully carried all 10 medical kits back into his wooden cabin and stowed them safely away. He picked up his tactical crossbow, wiped the optical scope clean with the hem of his shirt, a ferocious glint in his eyes. The final day before the tide's arrival dawned. The entire Cloud Sea world had transformed completely. The pale gray cloud banks had turned pitch black as ink, as if the entire sky was collapsing, bearing down heavy on every survivor's head. The wind no longer merely howled. The floating island shuddered violently beneath the gale, threatening to break apart at any moment. Sue stood by his cabin window, peering through the crack to watch the chaos outside. Suddenly, his pupils constricted sharply. Vast swathes of dark green mist churned forth from the ink-black depths of the Cloud Sea. Thick and cloying, the mist wire of sickening rot, carried by the wind. It surged toward the floating islands like scores of venomous dragons bearing their fangs and claws. Poison gas. Sue's face palled instantly. He pulled up the district channel, and sure enough, the chat was in total pandemonium. Cough, cough, cough. This mist is toxic. The corrosive liquid burned instantly. Cough. In barely 10 minutes, the regional survivor counter in the top right corner plummeted from over 7,000 to just above 6,000. The tide hasn't even fully hit yet, and the prelude alone is this horrific. The determined fisherman drew a sharp breath. Then, a massive cloud of dark green toxic mist rode the gale straight for his floating island, seeping wildly through gaps in the wooden fence. Quick as a flash, Sue grabbed a tattered rag and stuffed every last crack in his cabin shut, sealing the poison gas out entirely. Instead of panicking, he stared at the rowing toxic mist outside, eyes lighting up with a sudden idea. A wild epiphany struck Sue. He spun around to stare at the humming basic water purifier sitting in the cabin's corner. Basic water purifier converts any liquid or cloud mist into purified drinking water. Any cloud mist that includes this poison fog. The island builder slapped his thigh in excitement. What everyone else saw as a death sentence was an endless supply of clean water to him. Sue sprang into action immediately. He slipped on the simple dust mask he'd gotten from a blind box earlier, took a deep breath, threw open the wooden door, and darted over to the purifier. Suck it all in. He cranked the purifier's intake valve to maximum capacity. As the purifier let loose a deafening roar, its internal cloud filtrations and glowing brilliant blue without pause. A ferocious suction force erupted from the intake vent. The dark green toxic mist rampaging across the floating island was dragged toward the machine, swirling into a tiny tornado that streamed unceasingly into the purifier. Glug 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 glug. Loud filtering sounds echoed from within the machine. Deadly toxins were trapped firmly by the filter sand while pure water was rapidly separated out. Drip drip rush. In under 3 minutes, crystal clear, impurity-free purified water poured out of the spout below the purifier. It worked. Sue laughed in wild delight. He quickly lined up over a dozen empty plastic bottles beneath the spout to catch the water. The toxic mist thickened outside by the minute. Yet Sue's floating island stood as an isolated safe zone. Every wisp of poison fog drifting overhead was greedily swallowed by the purifier, turned into bottle after bottle of life-saving water. The district channel was drowning in despair by now. Listening to their wails, Sue sat in his warm cabin and simmered a rich tomato beef broth in an iron pot over the fire pit. He took a huge sip of the steaming soup and sighed contentedly. This was pure windfall profit. He did nothing but watch the purifier run non-stop the entire afternoon. The toxic mist only faded as dusk fell. His inventory now held a full 50 L of purified water. 50 L in a world where every drop of water cost blood to obtain. This fortune was staggering, beyond belief. Sue patted the plastic jug brimming with water in satisfaction. Night fell completely. The gale showed no sign of letting up. If anything, it raged harder. The Cloud Sea beyond the island was pitch black, impossible to see through. Only low, rumbling echoes drifted up from the abyss below, as if a massive gate to hell was creaking open. Sue cocked his tactical crossbow, strapped his entrenching tool to his waist, and secured a high-intensity flashlight to his left arm with cloth strips. He dragged a wooden stool over to the dedicated firing slit cut into the cabin wall. his gaze cold as steel as he fixed it on the darkness outside. His fortifications were flawless, and he was in peak condition. Time ticked steadily closer to midnight. The entire cloud sea world fell eerily silent. Nothing but the wind howling. A suffocating weight hung in the air. As soon as the system clock hit 12 midnight, a shrill soul-rending crimson alarm blared inside every survivor's head. The cloud sea tide has officially erupted. Cloud sea backflow. Acid rain descending. Absol creatures have awakened. Boom. The instant the system alert faded, the floating island lurched violently, shaking so hard Suze nearly went flying off his stool. Earthquake. Suze gripped the window frame tight to steady himself. He flicked on the high-powered flashlight strapped to his arm. A blinding white beam sliced through the dark, shining out over the cloud sea beyond the island. The sight before him made his pupils shrink down to pinpricks. The black cloud sea churning far below was surging upward like boiling water, flooding back toward the islands. The raindrops were not transparent. They glowed an unnatural pale yellow. Sizzle, 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 where the acid droplets hit the cabin roof and wooden fence outside. White smoke billowed and corrosive hisses filled the air. Acid rain. This hellish weather leaves no room to breathe. Suze ground his teeth. Thankfully, he plastered every crack in the cabin shut with mud beforehand. If the acid seeped inside, it would eat straight through skin. Illuminated by the flashlight beam, countless thick shadowy shapes suddenly shot forth from the surging black cloud sea. They were no distinct monsters, twisted black vines of some unholy breed. Each vine was as thick as a human thigh, solid black, lined with blade-sharp barbs that whipped wildly in the wind like giant riding tentacles. Crack, crack, crack. Several massive black vines lashed hard against the wooden fence, ringing Suze's island with terrifying force. Splinters flying as the thick logs creaked under the blow. They're trying to drag the island down. Suze instantly grasped their motive. They weren't here to hunt humans. They sought to tear the entire floating island apart and drag everything on it down into the abyss. Scrape, scrape, scrape. More black vines crawled up over the island's rim, writhing with sentient purpose. They coiled tight around the wooden fence, squeezing hard to rip the post straight from the mud. Murderous intent flared in Suze's eyes. He raised his tactical crossbow, lining the optical scope up with the thickest vine within sight. Die, the determined fisherman squeezed the trigger hard. The bowstring released with a deep hum. A dull boom echoed from the bowstring, and the alloy armor-piercing bolt cut straight through the acid ring. The stake punched through. Unstoppable penetration power unleashed. The bolt struck dead center of the vine, piercing clean through its thick trunk. The vine let out an agonizing screech, thick, reeking dark green sap gushing from the wound. It thrashed violently a few times before losing its grip on the fence and sliding off the island's edge into the depths of the cloud sea. It works. The crossbow's power cuts through their defenses. Suze's spirit soared. He stepped his foot into the cocking stirrup, drawing, knocking, aiming, and firing in rapid succession. Twang, twang, twang huddled at the narrow firing slit. The fortified survivor became a ruthless killing machine. One alloy bolt after another screamed through the rain, precisely cutting down every black vine that tried to breach his barriers. The ground outside the fence was stained dark green with the vines oozing sap. Yet there were far too many vines. An endless nest of them seemed to lie hidden deep within the cloud sea. Every wave he shot back was replaced by more, thicker vines surging forward without pause. A sharp crack split the air. A sharp splintering sound cut through the chaos. A section of wooden fence on the island's right finally gave way, under the pull of over a dozen black vines, ripped clean from the mud as splintered timber flew everywhere. The fortified survivor reacted, a vicious glint flashing in his gaze. With the fence no longer blocking them, the python-like black vines flooded through the breach like unchained floodwater, surging onto the island. They writhed and slithered across the muddy ground, their razor barbs gouging deep trenches in the dirt as they headed straight for the cabin at the island's center. Faced with his broken defenses, Suze did not rush out to fight them recklessly. Hand-to-hand combat against mindless plant creatures in the raging wind and searing acid rain was nothing short of suicide. He quickly stowed his crossbow, lowered the firing slit shutter just enough to leave a narrow aiming gap. Hunkering down deep inside the cabin, Suze watched coldly, his gaze locked on the vines, closing in fast, 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter. Just as the leading thick vines reached the cabin's perimeter, the frontmost several lurched downward sharply, losing all balance and plummeting. Heavy impacts thundered repeatedly. Heavy crashing sounds echoed one after another. That circular trench had been dug in advance by Suze. The black vines charged forward far too fast to break, tumbling into the 1 meter deep trench like dumplings being dropped into boiling water. And lining the trench floor were countless sharpened wooden stakes, sticking upward in dense clusters. A sickening impact echoed, The bolt tore through flesh. Sharp piercing sounds echoed as the pointed stake skewered the bodies of the black vines. Dark green stinking venom gushed from their wounds, mixing with pale yellow acid rain falling from the sky to pool into a nauseating toxic sludge at the bottom of the ditch. The vines trapped in the trench let out shrill beast-like screeches. They thrashed and writhed wildly against the narrow earthen floor, trying to tear free of the wooden stakes by brute force. But the more they struggled, the deeper the stakes drove into their flesh. Some vines were pinned flat to the mud by multiple spikes, unable to move an inch. Suze's eyes lit up, a surge of exhilaration rushing through him. This forward-thinking trench trap had worked flawlessly, neutralizing the first wave of the fiercest assault entirely. Yet Suze knew better than to celebrate just yet. More black vines kept surging through the breach without end. The trench had limited space. Once filled with the dead vines ahead, the following vines would simply trample their fallen kin and cross the defensive line. The resourceful castaway instantly raised his tactical crossbow, lining the optical sight up on the writhing vines below. Those trying to scramble back up the trench walls. Twang twang twang. The vibrating hums of the bowstring reverberated without pause inside the wooden cabin. The stranded survivor fought like a cold, unfeeling sniper, his hands steady as bedrock. Alloy armor-piercing bolts carrying lethal kinetic energy shot directly down into the trench. With every pull of the trigger, another wet strike landed. A vine that had just poked its tip over the trench rim took a bolt straight to its core, snapping clean in two before collapsing limply back down. The trapped creature split open. Another bolt pinned a vine attempting to coil round the cabin's foundation fast to the earth and trench wall. Suze fired at blistering speed. The 200 alloy bolts granted by his tenfold multiplier system gave him unlimited ammunition to keep firing. His precise controlled shots pinned all vines pouring through the right breach, firmly within the trench, none able to cross the line. Just as Suze thought he had stabilized the situation, the wind suddenly intensified to a ferocious gale. Storm winds laced with concentrated acid rain tore violently at the wooden palisades, lining the island's left flank and rear. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The corrosive hiss of acid rain grew louder and more constant, peering through the firing slit. Suze saw thick white smoke billowing off the palisades. The thick round logs were pockmarked and eaten away by the rain, brittle and fragile. Creak, creak, battered by wind and acid rain alike, the fences groaned under unbearable strain, teetering on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, the trench outside the cabin was already half filled with dark green venom and vine carcasses. Durability was dropping away too fast. The resourceful castaway ground his teeth, beads of cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. The real all-out defensive battle was only just beginning. A low, muffled thunderclap exploded deep within the roiling black cloud sea, as if sounding the horn for a full-scale onslaught. With the thunder, the acid rain plummeted down in far greater volume, shifting from a sparse drizzle to a torrential downpour. A curtain of pale yellow rain shrouded the entire floating island, filling the air with a choking stench of sulfur and rot. A violent crash followed. The structure collapsed with a roar. The wooden palisades on the left and rear finally reached their breaking point, eroded relentlessly by acid rain and pummeled by gale-force winds. Huge sections crashed down in heaps, reduced to splintered rotting timber. The defensive line had completely crumbled. Countless black vines swarmed toward the island from all directions like sharks, catching the scent of blood. They climbed over the carcass-choked trench, thrashing their twisting tendrils as they lunged at the isolated wooden cabin. The object struck the ground. An abnormally thick mutant black vine as wide as a wooden bucket slammed hard against the cabin wall. The sturdy cabin shook violently, mud packed into its seams, showering down in clumps. The mutant vine then snaked rapidly up the wall, coiling tight around one of the cabin's main load-bearing support pillars. Timber fractured loudly. A shrill squeal of compressed timber rang out. Beneath the vine's crushing constriction force, the pillar began to bend slightly. Jagged cracks splitting its surface. Suze's eyes blazed red. This cabin was his last safe haven. If it was destroyed, he would be fully exposed to the acid rain and monsters, certain death. The cramped cabin left no room to wield the tactical crossbow properly. While the bolts packed strong, piercing power, they could not deliver an instant kill against such bucket-thick mutant vines. Suze tossed the crossbow aside in one sharp motion, yanking the heavy multifunctional military entrenching tool from his waist. He quickly slipped on a dust mask, zipped his windbreaker all the way to the collar, drew a deep breath, and kicked the wooden door wide open in one fierce blow. Wind laced with acid rain slammed straight into his face as soon as he stepped outside. Several drops of acid rain splattered onto the back of his hand. Hiss, a searing burning pain shot through his skin. Thin white smoke curled off the spot, which instantly swelled into blisters. The stranded survivor ignored the agony. his gaze sharp and feral as a wolf, locked firmly on the mutant vine wrapped around the support pillar. Sus roared, pushing off with all his leg strength and charging forward. He gripped the entrenching tool's handle with both hands, twisted his waist, and using the momentum of his sprint, brought the high-strength alloy blade crashing down hard into the vine. The razor-sharp blade sliced through the vine's tough outer skin like tofu, sinking deep into its fleshy core. The mutant vine let out a piercing shriek, gushing torrents of dark green venom from its wound. The venom splashed on as Sus's windbreaker, hissing corrosively and burning multiple holes straight through the fabric, still not cut through. One more strike. Veins bulged on Sus's arms as he wrenched the shovel free, swinging a heavy horizontal per backhanded. This blow severed the vine's internal fibrous tissue clean through. The bucket-thick mutant vine split into two jagged halves. The section coiled around the pillars slid limply down, while the other half recoiled frantically back into the dark cloud sea as if electrocuted. Seamlessly switching from long-range sniper to close-quarters brawler, Sus pushed his combat capabilities to their absolute limit. A surge of adrenaline dulled the burn of the acid rain temporarily. He swung the entrenching tool, slaughtering vines wildly all around the cabin. One sweeping chop split a sneaking vine directly down the middle. A quick backhand slash severed the tip of another encroaching tendril. Rotten venom mixed with pale yellow acid rain streamed down Sus's cheeks. He stood like a blood-soaked war god guarding the cabin doorway, no vine able to break past his line. 5 full minutes passed before the surrounding vines seemed cowed by his ferocity. Their attack slowed drastically, and they eventually retreated back into the abyss. Sus gasped for ragged breaths, leaning his weight on the entrenching tool as he stood mired in mud. He glanced down at his arms and thighs. His windbreaker was riddled with holes eaten away by acid rain and toxic venom. Exposed skin was covered in swollen blisters and burn marks. A blazing wave of pain crashing over him. That hurts like hell. He dared not linger outside any longer. Spinning to retreat into the cabin and propping the wooden door shut tight with a thick lock. He had barely sat down to catch his breath when his gaze drifted inadvertently to the bottom right corner of his vision. His heart clenched tight at what he saw. The icon for the regional chat channel flashed violently, glowing a blood-red crimson. Gritting his teeth against the all-consuming pain racking his body, Sus dragged a red-first and medical kit out from the corner. He bit down to pop the latches open, pulling out a bottle of sterile purified water and several rolls of sterile bandages. First, he carefully rinsed the acid rain burns on his arms and thighs. Every splash brought a searing stab of pain that made him suck in sharp breaths. Once clean, he tore open several strong painkillers and swallowed them dry before wrapping his wounds tightly layer upon layer with sterile bandages. Thank God for the medical supplies from the tenfold multiplier system, Sus thought to himself in quiet relief as he finished dressing his wounds. The painkillers soon kicked in, dulling the burning agony. Leaning back against the wooden wall, Sus activated the blood-red regional channel icon with a flick of his mind. As soon as he opened the channel, a suffocating wave of despair washed over him. Those black vines flipped all the soil up. The acid-seared exposed material. This rain is poison. Hey monsters. There are monsters beneath the cloud sea. It's watching us. This voice message about the giant eye trembled with unbridled terror, sending a chill crawling up Sus's spine. A vertical eye the size of a truck. Sus drew a deep breath to calm his shock. He recalled the warning from the drift bottle. It was clear now that even 30 meters up was plagued by deadly vines and acid rain. The abyss 100 meters down must hold far more horrifying creatures. Yet danger always walked hand in hand with reward. The resources down there would surely dwarf what was available on the surface many times over. Screams continued flooding the channel, but the most chilling message came from Zhao Tianba, the once arrogant tyrant of the chat. A 1-minute voice message sat pinned at the very top. The vines are climbing up. Save. Gurgle. Gurgle. The audio cut off abruptly with sickening bone-crunching sounds and drowning gurgles, falling into total silence. Zhao Tianba's avatar faded to gray, the marker of the dead. This man, who had swindled and conned countless others to hoard piles of supplies, had built no effective fortifications at all. Mutant black vines had dragged him and his ramshackle cabin straight into the abyss, leaving nothing but a mangled corpse. Suzy stared coldly at Tianba's gray avatar, feeling no flicker of pity. In this cruel world, fools only ever met one fate. He shifted his gaze to the top right corner of his vision. Current regional survivors, 3,892 per 10,000. Christ, Su gasped in shock. Less than an hour of the tidal surge had claimed over 2,000 lives. The survivor count had plummeted below 4,000. The brutal elimination rate was like a meat grinder grinding down the survivors. Despair spread thick through the channel, a stark contrast to Su's relative safety. He sat inside his sturdy cabin, with food and water in stock, maxed out defenses, even enough leisure to watch the chaos unfold in the chat. This steady, unshakable sense of security forged through careful preparation was something those clinging to life on the brink of death could never comprehend. Just then, the noise outside shifted abruptly. The black vines lashing the cabin seemed to retreat on some unspoken command. Flowing backward like a receding tide, the howling wind died down, and the corrosive acid rain ceased entirely. An eerie silence blanketed the entire floating island. The tidal surge is over. The tenfold system user frowned, not relaxing his guard for a single second. The system announcement had warned abyss creatures were growing active. Vines alone could never be the full threat. Sure enough, the next instant, a dense buzzing hum echoed up from the churning black cloud sea. The sound resembled millions of flies beating their wings immediately, dull and grating, carrying a sickly faded wind as it drew rapidly closer to the island. Every muscle in Suze's body tensed rigidly. He snatched the high-intensity flashlight strapped to his left arm, shining its beam out through the firing slit into the blackness beyond. The sight that met his eyes made his pupils shrink sharply, his stomach churning violently. Beneath the harsh white beam, a pitch-black swarm rose up from the depths of the cloud sea. It was no cloud at all. Countless fist-sized grotesque flying insects packed tight together. Their bodies were a sickly dark red, bloated like blood-swollen leeches. They had no legs, but two pairs of translucent thin wings sprouted from their backs. They hovered in dense, swirling clusters, beating their wings fast enough to produce that skin-crawling buzz. It's a bug plague. The island builder cursed, yanking the firing slit's cover closed tight, leaving only a razor-thin crack to observe outside. 3 crushing impacts shook the ground. A heartbeat later, the overwhelming insect swarm crashed into the cabin's outer walls like a raging storm. Dense, muffled impacts boomed like someone hammering a giant war drum, the whole cabin trembling faintly under the sheer force. Suze braced his weight against the wooden door, listening to the scraping sounds outside. Instead of falling off after slamming into the planks, the insects clamped their mouths onto the wood with rows of tiny, razor-sharp serrated jaws. Creak, creak. Horrifying gnawing sounds echoed from every direction. Thousands upon thousands of insects chewed in unison, stripping layers of wood from the cabin's outer walls before his very eyes. Suze's face paled with alarm. Earlier, to block wind and acid rain, he had sealed every crack in the cabin tight with mud mixed with water, and that quick decision had saved his life now. If any gaps remained, these fist-sized bugs would have flooded inside like a river, gnawing him down to bone. But the mud seal would not hold forever. The cabin's durability plummeted rapidly beneath the swarm's relentless gnawing. Suze could even see thin spots on the planks, faint red light seeping through from outside. Can't let them chew straight through the walls. Suze grabbed his tactical crossbow only to hurl it down in frustration a heartbeat later. Physical bolts were useless against such a dense swarm. One bolt could only pierce 2 or 3 bugs at most. Yet thousands swarmed outside. Even firing all 200 bolts would barely make a dent. As for the entrenching tool, charging out to fight hand-to-hand was a suicide play. A dozen bugs clinging to his body would drain his blood-dry in moments. The threat had shifted entirely from strength-based physical vines to a sheer numbers environmental disaster. Oppression weighed heavy, as if death sithed against his throat. Suze's mind raced a mile a minute, his eyes darting wildly across the cramped cabin. Purified water, useless. Can't drown them. Medical kits, even more useless. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a towering stack of camouflage cardboard boxes in the corner. 200 high-calorie self-heating military field rations gifted by his tenfold multiplier system. Suze's eyes lit up, a plan sparking in his mind. Self-heating rations, heating packs, quicklime in his old world. The core components of self-heating food heat packs were quicklime and aluminum powder. When quicklime mixed with water, a violent chemical reaction erupted, releasing massive amounts of high-temperature steam immediately. If water was added inside a sealed container, the trapped expanding gas would rupture the vessel and trigger a violent explosion. Physical attacks won't work. Suze lunged straight for the pile of field rations. Fabric tore sharply. A violent tearing sound followed. His hands moved at lightning speed as he tore open ration after ration, ignoring the dehydrated beef and compressed biscuits inside. He ripped out every white non-woven fabric heating pack. 10 packs 20-30. The massive stockpile granted by his tenfold critical strike. Buff gave him free rein to burn through supplies immediately. Survival rations others would hoard and ration sparingly were ruthlessly pulled apart here. He grabbed several large empty plastic water bottles, tore open the quicklime heating packs, and dumped all their pale gray powder into the bottles in one go. Each bottle held enough quicklime to fill 5 or 6 heating packs. Pour water in. Suze grabbed the bottle of purified water, took a deep breath, and his gaze sharpened with total focus. He twisted open the water bottle, aimed it at one plastic jar stuffed full of quicklime, and poured half the bottle's contents inside in one swift motion. Then, with the lightning-fast reflexes of someone who'd spent 20 years single, he screwed the jar's lid on as tight as it would go. Barely after the lid sealed shut, violent boiling erupted inside the plastic jar instantly. Quicklime reacting with water unleashed terrifying blistering heat. The jar expanded and warped visibly before his eyes, and searing warmth seeped straight through his gloves into his palms. The determined fisherman threw open the firing slits, cover braving swarms of venomous insects surging in from outside. He hurled the homemade bomb, now stretched to its breaking point, hard into the densest cluster of bugs hovering midair. As soon as the bomb left his grasp, Sus slammed the cover shut and clamped both hands over his ears. A deafening detonation ripped through the air above the wooden cabin. The sealed plastic jar could no longer withstand the catastrophic internal pressure, and shattered completely. Scalding steam bloated from thermal expansion, mixed with clouds of boiling quicklime powder billowing outward, through the heart of the insect horde like a volcanic eruption. Squeal, 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 shrill, agonized screeches filled the sky immediately. The boiling steam cooked their internal organs instantly, and any flecks of quicklime dust landing on their damp exoskeletons triggered a second wave of corrosive burns. Crackle, pop, crackle, hundreds upon hundreds of charred, half-scorched insects plummeted from the sky like dark red hailstones, crashing into the mud surrounding the cabin and releasing a sickening stench of burnt rot. It worked, ha! Suze's eyes lit up with wild excitement. He didn't pause for a second and repeated the exact same process again. Pour water, screw the lid tight, throw. Boom, boom, boom. A string of explosions echoed across the floating island. Massive plumes of white superheated steam laced with lime dust bloomed like deadly flowers amid the black swarms of bugs. Every blast wiped out a huge patch of the insect horde. The bugs that had been gnawing relentlessly at the wooden cabin were terrified by the sudden, ferocious heat and explosions. The ravenous chewing noises fell silent. After hurling more than a dozen quicklime bombs in succession, the temperature around the cabin had jumped over 10. The air rire of harsh lime and roasted insects. The surviving bugs finally realized the tough little shelter was no easy target. Letting out a chaotic buzz, they fled in all directions like a receding tide, scurrying back into the shadowy depths of the sea of clouds. Sus leaned against the wooden wall, gasping for air as sweat soaked through the back of his shirt. Staring at the carpet of insect corpses outside, a triumphant grin tugged at his lips. First the strangling vine onslaught, then the ravenous bug swarm. Relying on unyielding courage and stockpiled supplies multiplied tenfold. By his multiplier system, he'd weathered to lethal assaults single-handedly. But the smile on Suze's face froze before it could fully spread. A steady rhythmic tremor suddenly rumbled up through the floating island beneath his feet. Repeated collisions hammered the defenses. The sound resembled some colossal creature climbing upward step by step from the clouds below the island. Every vibration sent a sharp jolt through Suze's heart. Suze gritted his teeth. His eyes locked rigidly on the island's edge where the tremors originated. He snatched up his tactical crossbow off the ground and drew the string to full tension. A cold alloy armor-piercing bolt rested steady in the firing groove. The beam of his high-intensity flashlight pinned down that stretch of shoreline. If any monster dared show its head, he would pull the trigger immediately, blasting a gaping hole straight through its skull. The rumbling drew closer, growing more frequent, as if death itself was pounding furiously at his door. Sus held his breath entirely. Cold sweat dripped down his cheeks and splattered into the muddy ground. He could even feel the earth beneath him bulge slightly. Something massive was about to burst forth at any moment. With one final low, thunderous boom, dirt at the island's edge erupted, sending mud and rock fragments flying everywhere. A towering mass hurtled upward from the depths of the sea of clouds with a howl of wind, slamming heavily against the trench Sus had dug earlier, letting out a deafening metallic clang. Suze's finger tensed hard against the trigger, nearly loosing the bolt, but when he focused his gaze, he froze stock still. This was no snarling, terrifying beast, nor a scaled tentacle monster. It was an enormous metal treasure chest, over half a man tall and 2 meters long. Its surface was crusted over with black cloud barnacles and covered in faded scratches, reeking of a thick, absol rot, looking like some ancient relic left dormant on the seabed for 100 years. Before Sus could recover from this shocking twist, a cold, shrill scarlet system alert blared inside every survivor's mind, making their eardrums throb. A global system announcement followed. The first cloud tide has officially concluded. Absol creatures have retreated into hibernation. System notice. As soon as cloud tide will arrive in 1 month, Absol beast will grow far more ferocious then. All survivors must strive to stay alive. As the system's voice faded, the howling winds that had threatened to tear the sky apart died instantly. The highly corrosive, pale yellow acid rain vanished without a trace. The entire sea of clouds sank back into its lifeless gray haze, as if the catastrophic ordeal had never happened at all. It's over. It's actually over. Suz exhaled a deep breath of stale air. His frayed nerves relaxed all immediately, and he collapsed heavily onto the mud, utterly drained. Glancing at the gigantic metal chest before him, he finally understood the source of those terrifying tremors. Those rumblings hadn't been monster footsteps climbing up. The powerful reverse cloud current left behind by the receding tide had dragged this tidal relic chest up from the deep cloud layers and deposited it on the floating island. After releasing all his pent-up stress, he scrambled back to his feet, his eyes blazing with greed as he stared at the massive metal chest. This was a gift left by the receding tide. Even a fool could tell it would be stuffed with top-tier supplies. He pulled his multi-purpose entrenching tool from his waist, strode to the chest, and jammed the sharp blade deep into the seam along its lid. The muscles in Suz's arms bulged, veins popping as he bore down hard on the shovel. A shrill screech of scraping metal rang out as the chest lock snapped clean off. Under brute force playing, the heavy metal lid flew open. No blueprints or fancy gimmicky items filled the chest. Instead, two types of basic yet incredibly valuable building materials were stacked neatly inside. The couch contained premium pre-cut stone bricks, 100 acquired rock-resistant planks, 100 premium pre-cut stone brick, specially refined by system craftsmanship, extremely high hardness, built with interlocking grooves that fit seamlessly without cement, unbreakable rock-resistant plank, thick lumber soaked in special preservative serum, insect-proof, moisture-resistant, and able to withstand moderate acid rain corrosion. The perfect construction material for shelters. Suz's eyes lit up brilliantly at the sight of the contents. Defensive building materials. His rickety old wooden cabin had been ravaged by acid rain and bugs, riddled with holes, and on the verge of collapse. With these premium supplies, he could build a genuine impenetrable fortress. At that moment, the emotionless mechanical system tone echoed in his mind as scheduled. Host resource acquisition detected. Another catch triggered the tenfold effect. The catch contained premium pre-cut stone bricks 1,000. The catch contained rock-resistant planks 1,000. A heartbeat later, blinding white light flashed wildly across the floating island. When the glow faded, a towering mound of stone bricks and planks materialized directly in front of Suz. A full 1,000 heavy solid stone bricks, alongside 1,000 planks carrying a faint medicinal preservative scent, covered nearly half the small island's surface. This is the real jackpot. The fortified survivor pumped his fist in wild excitement. With this mountain of construction materials, he could properly plan his living space from now on. Moreover, the system announcement had explicitly mentioned upgrading fishing rods. He clearly remembered intel from drift bottles. Basic fishing rods only reached 30 meters into shallow cloud layers. Once upgraded to 100 meters, the supplies he could haul up would see an astronomical leap in quality. Ambitious glint flickered in Suz's eyes. The morning after, the tide lingered with faint reeks of acid and burnt rut hanging in the air. Suz didn't rush to start construction immediately. Instead, he pulled up the regional chat channel in the bottom right of his vision. He wanted to see how many survivors remained after that meat grinder disaster. As soon as the panel opened, a blood-red number in the corner stabbed straight into his sight. Current regional survivor count, 31,002 per 10,000 hiss. Suzy gasped sharply, a chill crawling over his scalp. Out of 10,000 people in the zone, more than half had perished in a single night. Nearly 7,000 living souls had vanished without a trace into the bottomless sea of clouds. Suz dared not even imagine. The regional chat channel hummed with none of its usual chatter, filled only with cries of despair. The flesh rotted down a bone. It was horrific. Right before the tide ended, there was this massive crunching noise from deep in the clouds. Bones being crushed to splinters. Something colossal down there was eating everyone who fell. Sounded like a train rumbling beneath the clouds. He knew better than anyone. In this merciless world, sympathy was worthless trash. He caught faint rumblings of that hundreds-meter-long creature crawling last night. Proof that terrifying leviathans capable of crushing them with ease lurked far below the 30 meters cloud layer. No time to rest. The resourceful castaway slapped his cheeks to shake off exhaustion and focus himself. Grabbing his entrenching tool, he walked over to his hole-ridden wooden cabin. The structure had burned through its last shred of durability during last night's bug swarm and acid rain, its walls thin as tissue paper. Without a shred of nostalgia, He swung the shovel and tore the ramshackle hut down in minutes, reducing it to a pile of scrap lumber. After clearing a wide open plot of land, he hauled over the premium stone bricks multiplied by his T-fold critical hit. Each brick weighed dozens of pounds, smoothly polished with precision-cut interlocking edges. Shirtless, Sis hauled the heavy bricks, one by one to the foundation, slotting them together perfectly like building blocks. Click, click. Sharp, crisp sounds echoed as the bricks locked into place. No cement, no tedious measuring, simple, brutal efficiency. Sis labored tirelessly like an engine, pouring out buckets of sweat. In just 2 hours, a solid stone wall, 2 meters tall and half a meter thick, rose from the ground. At this thickness, not even bugs or mutated black vines will stand a chance of breaking through. Sis patted the rigid stone wall with satisfaction, cool solidity meeting his palm. With the outer walls finished, he moved on to roofing and interior lining. He fetched the rot-resistant planks, cut them down to size with his tactical dagger and shovel, then layered them across the stone wall's top to build a sloped, sturdy roof to stop rain leakage. He packed mud and wood shavings into every gap between planks. Finally, he nailed a full layer of preservative planks along the inner stone walls to block the cold seeping from the rock. A semi-fortress of stone and timber 5 square meters in size now stood tall at the center of the floating island. Utterly unbreakable, it blocked wind and rain entirely, and its heavy stone walls wrapped him in unmatched security. Even after finishing the main structure, Sis did not stop working. Shovel in hand, he headed to the island's edge to repair the defensive trenches damaged the previous night. He ripped out all splintered wooden palisades, sharpened thick new timber stakes, and drove them deep into the mud. Next, he jumped down into the circular trench, cleared out tangled vine debris and insect carcasses, and tossed everything into the sea of clouds. He carved hundreds more sharp wooden spikes and jammed them point up across the entire trench floor. By the time he finished all preparations, dusk had fallen, dragging his exhausted body. Sis stepped into his brand new stone timber fortress. He shut the thick rock-proof wooden door and nearly all wind noise vanished instantly. The fortress interior was spacious with not a single drafty crack. He collapsed onto the floor, struck flint to light a small fire, tore open a self-heating military ration pack, and poured in purified water. Minutes later, rich savory steam curled from a hot dehydrated beef rice meal. The stranded survivor shoveled mouthfuls of rice greedily, feeling warmth spread through his stomach from the high-calorie food inside in pure relief. This is what living actually feels like. Staring at the unyielding stone walls, Sus's sense of safety peaked completely. If he could endure the days ahead and upgrade his fishing rod, he would finally be able to explore the deeper, far richer, more mysterious cloud layers below. Just as Sus finished eating and settled in for a long sleep inside his new fortress, that shrill scarlet system alert blared in his mind once more. The system broadcast another global warning. Severe climate shift across the sea of clouds. A 7-day extreme cold period has begun. Ambient temperature will plummet to -20 degrees Celsius immediately. All survivors must secure warmth immediately or freeze to death. This godforsaken place never lets anyone catch their breath. The tenfold system user shot directly upward off the ground, cursing under his breath. As soon as the system announcement ended, temperatures outside the island plummeted at an absurd rate. The previously mild air transformed into a piercing wind stinging with ice shards immediately. Even inside the fortress, Sus could clearly hear the creak of ice forming on the wooden palisades outside. Every breath he exhaled bloomed into a thick white fog midair. He still wore the tattered windbreaker eaten full of holes by last night's acid rain. Frigid wind cut through every tear, making him shiver violently, his teeth chattering without pause. He quickly pulled up the regional chat channel, which had devolved into total chaos as expected. The channel filled with reports of freezing conditions as survivors described blade-like winds and collapsing temperatures. Some fool nearby burned his fishing rod just to make a fire. Others admitted burning their rods for warmth. Staring at the desperate wails flooding the chat channel, Sus knew this frigid spell would be yet another brutal culling. Gritting his teeth against the piercing cold, Sus shoved open the wooden door of his fortress and bolted outside. The world beyond had turned into a frozen hellscape. A thin sheet of ice crystals even coated the gray-white cloud sea. Frigid gales whipped shards of ice that stung sharply against his face, battling the raging wind. Sus trudged to the floating island's edge. His hands were nearly numb from the bitter chill, yet he gripped the fishing rod tightly and cast the baited iron hook into the ice-cold cloud sea. Time dragged on, every second pure torment for Sus. Frost crusted his eyebrows and hair. His legs lost all sensation, and only sheer iron will kept him rooted in place. Just as he neared his breaking point, ready to retreat to the fortress and huddled by the fire. The float on the cloud surface plunged downward hard. The tug was gentle but steady. The line had caught something. A surge of adrenaline shot through Suz. He strained hard to haul the bamboo pole upward. Splash! A black burlap sack and an army green waterproof bundle flew onto the islet, crashing onto the ice. Frozen dirt. Suz stumbled over with numb hands and tore the package open without delay. The sack contained 50 kilograms of premium smokeless anthracite coal. The bundle also contained one military-grade polar sleeping bag, premium smokeless anthracite coal. Burns for an extremely long time with high calorific value. It produces no smoke or toxic fumes while burning, making it the perfect heating fuel for enclosed spaces. Military-grade polar sleeping bag crafted from top-tier Aragol thermal insulation. It retains the human body's core temperature, even in extreme -40°C environments. Lightweight and comfortable. Overjoyed at the stats of these two items, Suz's eyes welled up. Yet his tears froze into tiny ice shards the second they left his eyes. The multiplier answered the frozen catch immediately. The tenfold multiplier produced 500 kilograms of premium smokeless anthracite coal. The multiplier produced 10 military-grade polar sleeping bags. A blinding flash of white light erupted and a mountain of black coal, half a ton heavy, materialized. Right before Suz's feet, the island builder let out a wild laugh, grabbed a massive chunk of anthracite and one sleeping bag, rushed back into the stone and timber fortress, and slammed the wooden door shut tight. He stacked spare stone bricks into a large fire pit at the center of the fortress, smashed the coal into pieces, and tossed them inside, then lit it with flint and wood shavings. Premium anthracite had a low ignition point. Before long, orange flames roared to life in the pit. This coal lived up to its reputation. No choking smoke, and it radiated an intense, comforting heat in barely 10 minutes. The temperature inside the fortress skyrocketed. The stone walls trapped warmth perfectly, transforming the space that had once been an ice cellar into a warm spring haven. The tenfold system user stripped off his tattered windbreaker, bare-chested as he sat beside the fire pit. The warm flames seared his skin, and the relief nearly overwhelmed him. Thoroughly thawed, he spread the military polar sleeping bag across the floor and slipped inside. The fabric was impossibly soft, its inner thermal lining locking in his body heat. Wrapped in that cocoon of warmth, he almost forgot the brutal 20°C wasteland outside. The frigid spell no longer controlled his fate. Lying in the sleeping bag, Suz watched the dancing flames in the fire pit with a satisfied grin. While others burned their own clothes just to stay alive, he'd already secured unlimited warmth. For nearly every survivor in the district, the first night of the frigid spell was an endless, despairing nightmare. For Suz, however, it was the soundest sleep he'd ever had, cradled by the dual comfort of the polar sleeping bag and anthracite fire pit. Early the next morning, Suz climbed out of the sleeping bag and stretched lazily. The fortress still hovered around a cozy 20°C, so warm he barely wanted to move. He cracked the door open a sliver to peek outside. The entire floating island was buried under thick snow and ice. Howling winds tearing through the air, a post-apocalyptic winter wasteland. The island builder walked to the fortress corner and smiled contentedly at the mountain of vegetables piled there. The planting plot, nourished by system and rich soil and pure mineral water, grew crops at an absurdly accelerated rate. All the cabbages and tomatoes had fully ripened before the temperature plummeted. He'd reaped over a dozen giant green cabbages as big as wash basins, plus dozens of plump, juicy red tomatoes. He'd hauled every vegetable inside the fortress, then planted newly harvested seeds in indoor planters repurposed from crates, setting them near the fire pit to maintain a steady warm temperature. The determined fisherman rinsed the tomatoes with purified water and bit into them raw like fruit. Sweet tart juice burst across his tongue, replenishing the vitamins his body craved. Full and refreshed, he grew bored and opened the district chat channel. After a single night of brutal cold, the survivor count had plummeted yet again, dropping below 3,000. The channel overflowed with desperate final messages and frantic pleas for aid. Amid all the gloom, one out-of-place post caught Suz's eye. The sender was Lu Chong, whose profile picture featured a shifty-eyed young man. Lu Chong spammed the channel without pause, his tone feverish as if delivering a rallying speech. This blind box holds over a dozen thick army coats, plus 3 large iron stoves for burning firewood. At those words, survivors drowning in despair latched onto this last lifeline, and the entire channel erupted in chaos. Suz's brows furrowed faintly. A warm supplies blind box, so generously. Just as Suz voiced his doubts, a private message popped up sent straight from Lu Chong himself. Here's a deal. The determined fisherman let out a cold scoff reading the message. This con artist dared to target him. Instead of rejecting him outright, He feigned interest and replied. Thinking Suze had fallen for his scam, Lu Chong shot back a rapid reply. Rest assured, legend, the box is stuffed full of genuine goods. Funny thing though, it looks tiny. About the size of a microwave, and super light. Suze burst out laughing at the response. This idiot couldn't even lie logically. He took a screenshot of their private chat. Circled key phrases: the microwave-sized box, 10 lbs weight, over a dozen army coats, 3 large iron stoves in bright red. Then sent the screenshot straight to the district public chat paired with a mocking retort. A blind box weighing 10 lbs holding 3 massive iron stoves and over a dozen army coats. As soon as the screenshot and Suze's taunt went live, the channel, previously flooded with survivors trading supplies to Lu Chong, felt deathly silent. It took over 10 seconds for the cold fog survivors to snap out of their daze. He's right. 3 giant iron stoves can't weigh only 10 pounds. A microwave-ized box can barely fit 3 coats, let alone over a dozen. Several survivors repeated the scam allegation. Everyone report him together. Ruin him. His lies brutally exposed, Lu Chong became public enemy number 1. Cursed relentlessly by thousands across the district. Terrified, he shut down all private messages and didn't dare type. Sitting beside his warm fire pit, Suze watched Lu Chong's public humiliation unfold while tossing handfuls of green cabbage, leaves, and chunks of canned luncheon meat into an iron can. This frigid spell isn't nearly as tough as everyone makes it out to be. He bit down on blanched cabbage in utter comfort. On the second day of the frigid spell, the raging wind still howled like slashing blades. The entire Cloud Sea world had frozen into a massive ice cavern. Inside his spring-warm stone and timber fortress, Suze sat gnawing a ripe red tomato. In this 20 degrees Celsius hell, it was a luxury fit for gods. After finishing the tomato, Suze stood and stretched his stiff muscles. He glanced around, his brows furrowing slightly. He still needed room for activities. The space is far too small to operate freely. Suze's gaze sharpened as he opened his virtual inventory. 30 Sky Island Foundation stones glowed faint blue inside, resting quietly. Some he'd earned trading water and weapons earlier. Others he profited from selling defensive blueprints to desperate survivors. At a stage where most people hadn't even laid eyes on a single foundation stone, he'd hoarded 30 all to himself. It's time for a major expansion. Without hesitation, Suze opened the construction panel and selected Island Expansion. Detected 30 Sky Island Foundation stones. Consume all to expand. Use all of them, Suze commanded firmly in his mind. As soon as the thought left his head, the 30 foundation stones transformed into 30 blazing blue light pillars that slammed straight into the dirt beneath his feet. A deep vibration rolled through the ground. The entire floating islet shook with a deafening roar. The dirt lining the island's edges churned and stretched outward with a life of its own. The wooden palisades and trenches hugging the perimeter were pushed further out by this mysterious force. Soil flipped, ice shattered, and the thunderous rumble lasted a full 3 minutes before fading away. Suze drew a deep breath, pushed open the fortress's heavy wooden door, and strode outside. His eyes lit up the instant he stepped out. The creature's scale defied expectation. The island that had once spanned only 20 square meters had expanded all the way to 50, more than double its original size. 50 meters might only be a tiny single room in the real world, but in this realm of precarious, floating land masses dangling over an endless abyss, it was incredibly spacious. He immediately set about rationing the vast new area. The 5 square meter stone and timber fortress at the center would serve as the core living quarters, completely secure. A full 10 square meters on the left would become a large-scale future planning plot, its soil fully tilled loose. 5 square meters near the right edge would be a fishing zone. A wide empty stretch behind the fortress was reserved for stockpiling lumber, stone, and a half-ton of smokeless anthracite coal. Everything laid out in perfect order, satisfying even the most obsessive meat freak. After finishing all this manual labor, Suze felt no exhaustion, only renewed energy. He walked to the fishing zone, braving swirling ice shards, and picked up his tattered bamboo fishing rod once more. Suze baited the hook and cast hard, the line sinking into the freezing cloud sea. Wind and snow lashed his face like whips. Even with his windbreaker on, he shivered violently. Yet he stood rigid as a statue, eyes locked on the float, a feral wolf-like resolve burning in his gaze. In this world, slackness meant death. Time slipped by minute, for 3 full hours. The float tossed wildly in the gale without a single nibble, just as Suze's fingers threatened to freeze solid. Ready to head back to the fortress to warm up, the bamboo rod lurched downward violently. The pole was heavy like a block of cast iron. Big catch, Suze jolted awake, planted a firm horse stance. and hauled back on the rod with all his strength. The fishing line stretched taut, emitting a dangerous high-pitched hum, gritting his teeth. The muscles on his arms bulged. His boots scraped to pale tracks across the dirt. The fortified survivor forced the catch upward. He roared, driving power through his waist and leaning his entire weight backward. A deafening splash echoed. The frigid cloud sea split open, and a heavy black metal crate was dragged skyward, slamming hard onto the eyelet with a dull metallic thud. Gasping for breath, Sis rubbed his aching wrist and hurried forward. The crate had no lock, its surface caked in grime. He pried the latches open with his tactical dagger and lifted the lid. Staring at the contents inside, Sis froze before wild euphoria crashed over him. The catch contained traditional Chinese cast-iron cookware set. 1. Contains 1 large cast-iron wok, 1 precision steel kitchen knife, 1 solid wooden cutting board, 1 cast-iron spatula, forged from premium raw iron. It conducts heat rapidly and is extremely sturdy and durable. Sis was overjoyed. In a world where basic survival was a struggle, owning a proper cookware set drastically boosted his quality of life. Before he could lift the wok, a voice echoed, "Ding." The multiplication function activated again. The catch contained traditional Chinese cast-iron cookware set ×10. A flash of brilliant white light washed over the ground. 10 large black woks, 10 steel knives, 10 cutting boards, and 10 spatulas lined up neatly. Grinning like a villain staring at the hall of a chef's training camp, Sis hefted 1 giant wok and a full set of blades, turning to head back into the warm stone and timber fortress. Today, he'd cook a proper hearty meal to reward himself well. Stepping back inside, a wave of searing heat chased away the chill clinging to Sus's body. The premium smokeless anther blazed bright in the fire pit, casting warm orange light across the room. He stripped off his windbreaker and scrubbed the large cast-iron wok spotless. The wok was heavy, solidly crafted, ideal for slow-cooking meat stews. He stacked fireproof stone bricks above the fire pit to build a makeshift stove, resting the cast-iron wok securely on top. Time to make a hearty feast. He fetched cabbage, tomatoes, and luncheon meat. He set the solid wooden cutting board on the floor and grabbed the razor-sharp precision steel knife. His knife skills were clumsy at best, but the blade sliced through ingredients effortlessly. In a flash, everything was hacked and chopped into substantial pieces. Sis heated up his iron wok. Having no cooking oil, he dumped the luncheon meat dices straight into the pan. Sizzle. Torched by the high heat, rich grease oozed out of the luncheon meat immediately, crackling across the bottom. A thick aroma filled the room. Sis swallowed hard and tossed the tomatoes into stir-fry, sautéed in the hot rendered fat. The tomatoes quickly softened and released their juice, staining the wok's base an appetizing bright red. Next, he added the cabbage chunks and poured in most of a bottle of purified water. Bubble, bubble, he clapped the wooden lid on top. It was not long before the sound of boiling broth echoed from the iron wok. The rich fragrance of tomato cabbage stewed meat seeped out through the fortress's cracks, starkly out of place amid this freezing ice wasteland. Sis lifted the lid, gazing at the churning red broth and meat chunks, his appetite soaring. He picked up a chopstick, speared a piece of meat, and tasted it, only to frown faintly. The ingredients are top tier, but there's no salt. The flavor's far too bland for a food lover. The absence of seasonings was simply unbearable. Sus's eyes flicked, landing on the 9 spare kitchen sets sitting outside. He pulled open the trading zone interface immediately. The fortified survivor lifted the steaming wok brimming with glistening red stew, positioned himself at the perfect angle, and snapped a high-definition screenshot with the camera function. The photo captured plump meat cubes, emerald cabbage, thick crimson broth, even wispy tendrils of rising steam in crystal clarity. He listed the photo alongside 9 cast-iron kitchen sets on the trading market. Braised meat in an iron wok. This has to be a hallucination. His reckless gamble horrified everyone watching, and he posts this. This picture's definitely edited. There's no way fresh tomatoes exist in this hellhole. Trapped in this frigid death trap, most survivors clung to the brink of starvation, unable even to get their hands on hot water. Sus's snapshot of steaming stew shattered everyone's mental defenses, leaving countless people distraught and green with envy. His private message inbox flooded within seconds. Survivors offered salt, human, and mutated chili seeds in exchange for the cookware sets. Desperate to survive the freezing cold, Sus chuckled as he watched the endless stream of blinking notifications in his dashboard. He quickly sorted through the private messages, blocking every person trying to lowball him with timber and stone, only keeping those bearing genuine goods. In less than 10 minutes, all sold out. A flurry of system light flashes filled Sus's inventory. 2 large sacks of refined salt, a bottle of black pepper, a jar of chili powder, and 2 packets of faintly glowing special seeds. Deal done. Suze grabbed salt and black pepper, sprinkling them straight in. One stir of the iron spatula transformed the already rich aroma into something irresistible. Salt drew out the deepest umami of the ingredients, while the sharp spice of pepper stoked his appetite to new heights. Ignoring the scalding heat, Suze gulped down broth and meat. Damn, this is different. The sweet tang of tomatoes, fresh mildness of cabbage, and savory richness of luncheon meat exploded across his tongue. One mouthful of hot broth spread warm through every pore of his body, drawing a fine layer of sweat across his forehead. Amid this hellish, deep freeze, Suze sat inside his sturdy stone fortress, warming himself by the fire and feasting on wok braised meat, living far more comfortably than he ever had back in the real world. By the third day, outdoor temperatures plummeted below -30. The gray-white sea of clouds froze solid. Howling winds whipped snowflakes sharp as ice shards, lashing every surface of the sky island relentlessly. The regional survivor count plummeted off a cliff once more, falling below 2,000. Those lacking adequate warm supplies froze silently in their sleep. For the survivors who clung on, a new lethal crisis emerged, the winds blasting straight inside. The extreme cold last night made the planks expand and contract until they split wide open. Torn apart by brutal temperature swings, the shoddy ramshackle huts could not withstand the freeze, splitting open left and right. Frigid wind howled through the gaps, a death sentence for anyone trapped inside. Dirt, once cheap filler used only for island expansion and planting, instantly became an indispensable life-saving commodity in short supply. Just then, several arrogant usernames popped up in the regional chat. At their head stood Hong Dana, a burly fat man with a cigar in his mouth. Hong Dana spammed the channel smugly. Right after, the other members of the Dirt Alliance piled in to hype their scheme. The chat erupted in furious backlash at their words. Hong Dana brushed off the torrent of insults without a care, growing even more brazen. This was blatant predatory monopolization, draining survivors' drive for profit. Though boiling with rage, countless survivors stared at widening wall cracks and the biting wind seeping through. To stay alive, they gritted their teeth and traded their last precious rations for pitiful handfuls of mud. Suze sat beside his warm brazier, sneering at the scheming clowns parading around the chat. Dirt Alliance cornering the market. The resourceful castaway opened his inventory and glanced at the mountain of dirt stacked in the corner. Between previous island expansions, trench digging, and T-fold critical hit resource gains, he held over 10,000 units of dirt. He had far more than he could ever use for farming, hoarding it only wasted storage space. Without another word, Suze opened the trading zone and listed a full 3,000 units of dirt in one go. They're not even worth a passing thought. For 5 full seconds after the listing went live, the channel fell dead silent. Then the survivors erupted in wild celebration. 1 timber for 10 dirt units. This might as well be free. God, Suze is a legend. Long live Suze. Hurry and buy before stock runs out. The 3,000 units of dirt vanished without a trace in under a minute, snatched up by stampeding survivors. Suze's inventory swelled with 3,000 basic materials, while those desperate for wall patching mud secured their life-saving supplies. The so-called Dirt Alliance was utterly dumbfounded. They'd poured massive stocks of resources to buy out every private seller's dirt to seize the market, hoarding massive stockpiles of mud. Now Suze flooded the market at an absurdly low price, rendering their dirt worthless, hard enough to be useless, even as toilet paper. They'd lost everything they'd invested. Seething with rage, Hong Dana sent Suze a private message brimming with unhinged fury. The stranded survivor laughed, reading the impotent, raging message. He dismissed the threat as empty rage from an idiot. He sent the message, then blocked Hong Dana immediately. The exchange ended immediately. The channel flooded with jeers aimed at the Dirt Alliance. Hong Dana and his crew became the laughingstock of the entire region. The failed speculators stared blankly at their now worthless mountains of dirt. Too ashamed to type another word, Suze scoffed and tossed another chunk of smokeless coal into the brazier. The deep freeze lasted a full week before finally drawing to an end. The raging winds died down and temperatures slowly climbed, though still frigid. The deadly cold capable of freezing people solid into ice sculptures faded away. Snow and ice covering the sky island melted, sending frigid water through the soil and plummeting into the sea of clouds far below. Suze pushed open the door of his stone and timber fortress and breathed in long overdue fresh air. After this brutal week, the regional survivor count settled at 1,895. Out of an initial 10,000 players, less than 20% remained. The wasteland's cruelty knew no bounds. Those who survived had built basic defenses and stockpiled supplies, proving that the remaining competition was far more capable. Suze's gaze turned cold and sharp as he strode toward the fishing zone. Now that the deep freeze had lifted, He needed to rush to replenish supplies, above all, weapons. His only ranged armament was a tactical crossbow. Though it packed strong piercing power, its slow reloading speed was a fatal flaw. If swarmed by fast-moving monsters in large numbers, the crossbow's low rate of fire would spell disaster. Suz baited his hook and cast his line hard into the sea of clouds. As time passed, Suz noticed something strange. The fishing line on his bamboo rod kept sinking deeper and deeper. 10 meters, 20 meters, 28 meters. When the line hit 30 meters, an invisible resistance abruptly halted its descent. It was as if an unseen membrane stretched beneath the cloud sea, locking the hook in place. Unable to sink even a single centimeter further, a cold system rule alert echoed inside his head right after. The system forbade him from crossing that boundary. The intel from the drift bottle had been entirely accurate. 30 meters marked the absolute limit for new survivors. By then, the man who awakened on bare dirt no longer depended on luck for every breath or meal. Clean water flowed from his purifier, vegetables grew beside his shelter, and stored food waited behind reinforced walls. Coal warmed the fortress, medical kits protected his life, and ranged weapons guarded every approach from the clouds. His trades converted multiplied supplies into land, materials, blueprints, tools, and the strongest economy in the district. Thousands vanished through hunger, cold, panic, and reckless choices. Yet Suz answered every disaster with preparation. The tenfold multiplier never fought for him, built for him, or decided when danger was worth facing. It only magnified what he earned, while his discipline turned each catch into another layer of survival. That difference separated him from survivors who waited for rescue, demanded handouts, or gambled their lives through desperation. Suz started with the same 10 square meters, the same leaking hut, and the same cracked fishing rod. Now his expanding island held warmth, food, water, farmland, weapons, medicine, and walls strong enough to resist catastrophe. The Cloud Realm tried reducing humanity to frighten castaways, but Suz rebuilt control one resource at a time. From 10 square meters of helpless dirt, he created the safest technological stronghold above the endless clouds.